Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Administration and Finance Committee meeting on February the 11th, 2025. I'll now call on Rianne Kassar, Committee Clerk, to conduct the roll call. Rianne.
Thank you. Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Chair Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Saladin. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovic. Councillor Williams. Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantom peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to recognize that February is Black History Month, a time to celebrate the diversity, culture, and contributions of Black Canadians. This month invites us to honor Black individuals' vital roles in shaping Canada's identity and building a better Waterloo region. It is also a time to reflect on the historical and ongoing impact of systemic racism and to commit to strengthening equity and inclusion. I want to thank all organizations and groups across the region for organizing events and activities throughout the month. I would also like to mention the artwork by local university student Vanessa Okari is circulating through the region this month as a Grand River Transit bus wrap. So look out on our roads for that bus. Her work highlights how embracing differences and diversity can create a more inclusive, empowered community. Okay, we'll move on over to the agenda. I would ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. Don't see any. We'll move to our first item, number 4, a public hearing of a development charges complaint against subsection 24 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended. We will proceed with this public hearing regarding a development charge complaint under the Development Charges Act. Under the Act, an individual or entity required to pay a development charge may submit a complaint to the council of a municipality imposing the development charges. Regional Council has delegated the authority for holding the complaint hearing to this committee. The process for today's hearing will be as follows. Our Richard Brooks of the Region's Legal Services Division will provide a statement outlining the position of regional staff. The complainant, 162 Snyder's Road GP Inc., will have an opportunity to present their position. Following each statement, committee members may ask any clarifying questions. Both parties will then have an opportunity to make closing remarks. The committee will then render a decision in open session on the complaint. The committee may A, dismiss the complaint, or B, determine that an error has occurred in the application of the development charges bylaw and rectify it accordingly. I want to emphasize that today's discussion is not about policy changes to the development charges bylaw. The committee's role is strictly to assess whether the bylaw has been applied correctly. In this instance, decisions of this committee are final and binding, but may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. With that, I will now call upon Richard Brooks from the Legal Services Division to provide a statement summarizing the position of regional staff. Good morning, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will give a statement and I will take questions as you mentioned. There's also members of the planning staff here that are also available to answer questions, to provide assistance to myself and to this committee. So the starting point is the development charges bylaw of the region. And the development charges bylaw has a brownfield provision. And that provision allows developers to obtain a credit against regional development charges for eligible costs to remediate their contaminated sites. In 2019, a decision was made by Regional Council when it enacted the current version of the Development Charges Bylaw to phase out this brownfield program in the Development Charges Bylaw. And the way that it works is that a developer is entitled to 100% of its eligible costs if the required record of site condition, which is often called an RSC, is issued before December 31st, 2021. And then on a declining scale, the developer is entitled to only 50% of its eligible costs if the RSC is issued between January 1st, 2022 and July 31st, 2024. After that, there is no longer the brownfield credit under the development charges bylaw. So the issue for this morning is what is issued in the bylaw. So a record of site condition or an RSC summarizes the environmental condition of a property as of a certification date based on the completion of one or more environmental site assessments, often referred to as ESAs, conducted or supervised by a qualified person. And that qualified person is usually an environmental engineer. And then it can take two different routes. So the first route is the RSC application form and supporting documents are submitted by the qualified person to the Ministry of the Environment for review. Once the ministry confirms that the contents of the RSC submission meet regulatory requirements, the RSC is filed electronically to the Environmental Site Registry. And that registry is available to the public. Anybody can view it. With a date and, importantly, an RSC number. And the ministry issues a letter of acknowledgement. So that's one path that can go. And that's if everything's in order and the ministry is satisfied with the submission made. Alternatively, you can have a scenario where the ministry is not satisfied with the submission, and in that case, the ministry will issue a letter called a Notice of Not in Accordance. So if the submission is not satisfactory to the ministry, they'll send back a letter saying it's not good, there's flaws, there's something that's wrong, and you need to correct X and Y, and then you can resubmit it. And then if everything goes correctly on that, then it will go through the normal course where they'll say, yes, this is good. We'll issue a number to the RSC. We'll register it onto the registry, and we'll issue it with a RSC number. So turning to the development in question, which is located at 162 Snyder's Road in Baden. And it consists of a 32 residential unit complex. And the environmental work occurred in 2021. And as part of the complaint, the developer provided us with a letter from the environmental consultant, the qualified person that was involved in this. And that letter had a chronology of events. And the important thing is that in this case in 2021, there actually was kind of what I'll call a false start, where they made the submission and then the ministry said, no, it's not in accordance with what we need, and they sent it back, and then it was corrected and resubmitted. So I'll just go quickly through the chronology. So July 27th, 2021 was the original submission of the RSC documentation to the ministry. And in August, they received a notice of receipt for the RSC from the ministry. They said, yes, we've got it, we'll look at it. And then in September 15th of 2021, there was a notice of not in accordance. So the ministry said there was a flaw, there needed to be more testing. And again, the deadline under the bylaw for the for it to go down to 50% was January 1st, 2022. So time is ticking. The developer then went back, they did the more of the testing, and then they resubmitted their RSC documentation in November of 2021. In December of 2021, they received a notice of receipt of the second RSC submission. So again, the ministry says, yep, we've got it, we'll review it. And then unfortunately, on January 20th of 22, which is after the deadline for the region, the RSC was acknowledged by the ministry. And what happened is that they sent out the acknowledgement letter. They registered on the site registry. They issued it with a RSC number, and they gave it the date of January 20th, 22. Again, unfortunately, after the deadline. So the result was that region staff, based on this chronology, advised the developer that they were entitled to 50% of their eligible costs. So the total cost for the developer for the site was $332,000 and change. What that meant then is that with the 50% scale, they were entitled to $166,185. And again, that's a credit that is applied against the development charges that they owe to the region of Waterloo. So again, the issue is whether or not the developer, the complainant, met the deadline for the 100% credit for the development charges. And as staff understand the position of the complainant, the argument is that the certification of the RSC occurred before the January 1st, 2022 deadline. The position is that they submitted it before the January 1st, 22. They acknowledged that they did not get the acknowledgement until after January 1st, 22. But their position is that the term issue in the bylaw is not defined, and therefore the argument is that the certification date which they submit is important, is the issue. That satisfies the term issued before January 1st, 22. So the position of staff is as follows. The first point staff would make is that not every term in legislation is defined. It's quite common, whether it's provincial legislation, federal legislation, or a bylaw, is that not every word is defined. And in the staff report that was provided, there is a legal principle on interpretation that the courts follow. And it is as follows. The modern approach to statutory interpretation requires that the words of a statute be read in their entire context and in their grammatical and ordinary sense, harmoniously with the scheme of the Act, the object of the Act, and the intention of Parliament. And that applies with the bylaw as well. This is about what was the intention of the region, what was the intention of council when that deadline was created in 2019. So the position of staff is that the term issued in the development charges bylaw means the ministry's issuance of its acknowledgement letter with the assigned RSC number. And staff contend that this is really the most important date. This is the date when the ministry looks at the RSC submission and says, yep, everything's in order, you've done enough testing, and we're now going to issue a RSC number. We're now going to put it on the registry so that the public can see it, and we're going to send you a letter of acknowledgement. Staff contend that saying that the certification date for the RSC or the submission date should be equated to the issued is problematic because, as we see even in this case, that the ministry can reject it. So relying on that is problematic. The next point is that, you know, as lawyers, you've probably seen it from TV and so on, is that lawyers will, you know, go to case law, they'll go to other sources to try to, well, what does this word mean? Again, you can use the ordinary meaning and so on, but One source that lawyers often go to is a thing called Black's Law Dictionary. And Black's Law Dictionary defines the word issue as a verb as to put forth officially, to send out or distribute officially. And there are often cases, for example, when you look at the licensing bylaws of the region, what we often say is the clerk will issue a taxi license. If you go to the Environmental Protection Act, you'll see that they use a term, I still call it a certificate of approval, but they'll issue these formal approvals for water systems and so on. If you go down to the courthouse, lawyers create statements of claim, they go down to the court clerk, and the clerk looks at it and says, yep, this is fine, put a stamp on it in the old days and with a date and a file number, and they'll say, yep, the statement of claim is issued. So staff contend in this case that issued is that official position taken by the Ministry of the Environment that, yes, the RSC is in good standing. Here's an RSC number. Here it is on the registry. And to kind of cement that point is that if you were right now, or at least I did it this morning and nothing's changed, but if you were to go on to the registry that has RSCs and other environmental approvals that's operated by the province, it will be a map, and you can then take it and go right down to Baden, and you can find this subject property on the map, and then you can click it. And when you click it, the information, a line bar comes across, and it will identify an RSC number, it'll identify the property, the owner, etc. And importantly, it'll also have a date, and the date in this case is January 20th of 2022. And again, unfortunately, that is after the deadline. And it is for the 50% credit. So one may say that, well, you know, this is $166,000 that is in dispute, and for the region, that's a relatively small amount. But staff would respond to that to say is that we've reviewed it. There appears to be 5 to 10 other properties where this could be an issue. So it certainly sets a precedent that could have a larger financial impact. So the recommendation of staff is that it be the complaint be dismissed. Again, as stated, Mr. Chair, having said that, the first option is to allow the complaint and grant the 100% of the complaint's eligible costs, which would be about $332,000 with some change. And the other is to dismiss, where, again, the complainant gets the benefit of the current credit, which is $166,000. So there still is something that the developer is obtaining. But again, the recommendation of staff is to dismiss the complaint. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brooks. I'll now invite Chris Barnett, the representative for 162 Snyders Road GP Inc., to present their position. Oh, sorry. I skipped upon that. Sorry, Mr. Barnett. I'll entertain questions, actually, of Richard Brooks, first from council. So, Councillor Shawns.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Brooks, could you speak to council's intention behind the policy change and when those discussions were happening? What I'm wondering is, was the development already in process when those changes were being discussed?
Councillor, I'm going to, if it's all right, defer to planning staff who were dealing with this specifically.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This development came to us in early 2021. We review brownfield site eligibility before they make a formal application with the RDC exemption. They were deemed eligible for the brownfield exemption in February of 2021. And at that time, they were advised to refer to a schedule in the bylaw that outlines these conditions in terms of the phasing out of the program.
Okay, so we were not aware, so council was not aware of this development at the time that we made the policy change, is that correct?
I don't believe so, through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Foxon.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So if I understand this correctly, on December 2nd, the ministry confirmed receipt of the document, but did not confirm. And so that would say to council, yes, the ministry's got the document, but that doesn't approve the the discount at that time. The approval only happens the date that the ministry confirms that it was a brownfield and deserves a discount. So if we did waive on the party and say, yes, we should pay the 300 and some odd thousand, we would have to reopen a lot of files and repay a lot of money. There's a hard date for a lot of things, and there's a good reason for that. And that is so that policies, when they come in on a certain date, are the policy. We can't waver on that because we'll bankrupt ourselves. But not just that, the reason for discounting or moving forward off this was because it was becoming costly, and it was the right move for the region. In other ways, we've moved forward in other areas. So I feel sorry for the applicant, but I also know, I think there's a hard line in the sand. When you're told that something has to be done by such and such a date, if you don't meet that date, there are consequences. Thank you.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I appreciate your comments, Councillor Foxton. I have a very different interpretation, however. I would say that the property owner in this case submitted all their paperwork and did everything on their end. And if we are about to put the province now in the hands of deciding when paperwork is filed, I think we're all in trouble. There are lots of things that we wait for the province that they claim are deadlines that they'll meet and they don't. So to be dictating when something is issued based off of when the province actually puts it forward, I have issues based off of how the province runs. However, that's not what my actual question was. Just wanted to make that comment. Mr. Brooks, when you were referring to issue in the definition under blacks is to send out or to distribute officially, whom is the person doing that act? Because I would say that the developer issuing it to the province or providing it to the province could potentially fall into that interpretation, or it could be the interpretation which you're choosing to take, that it's the province putting out their official documentation. So I'm curious on Black's definition of who is the person acting in the issuance.
Thank you. I would read the definition as it is someone officially putting out something official. Again, when we talk about the taxi bylaw, we say that it's the clerk, an official, that's issuing the license. When the court issues a statement of claim, it's the court as an official, as a government official. So I would say that in this case, issue in its ordinary sense would be the ministry. It's something, it's a government body. And I would say that if you were just commonly speaking about the developer and what they did before with the submission, I don't think you would say they issued the RSC to the ministry. You would say they filed it, they submitted it to the ministry. I think that would be the common phrase that one would use.
Now, I'm not too familiar with who does the actual RSC paperwork, but would it not be a professional of some sort with some form of official designation? Not government official, but other type of official, so could be interpreted as another official putting their mark behind their paperwork?
Fair enough. I mean, the qualified person is a defined term under the legislation. It is an environmental engineer. They are not a government official. So,
But it is another type of official.
They are not an official as in a government official, and I would say that what they did is they submitted the RC application. They filed it with the ministry. So,
but they're putting their professional designation behind their work as an official in whatever field they're qualified in.
Fair enough, but when I go down...
That's fine. That's all that I was wondering. I had one other question. Why wasn't council provided the full DC bylaw, just the interpretation from staff? Why couldn't we interpret it ourselves?
I would say that it is totally within the prerogative of council and this committee today to interpret the bylaw. We put forward the section in the report that is in dispute, and I would certainly say that the bylaw is available, should be available for any councillor to review. I mean, it's certainly available electronically on the region's website.
Yes, I'm not saying that. I was just asking staff more so why it wasn't put in the documentation, the full bylaw itself, for council's interpretation today. I don't think that's actually an answer for you. That's probably for clerks. But thank you.
Okay. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Through you to Mr. Brooks. I think the nub of this is consistency and fairness. So my question was really to say our interpretation of the word issue is consistent with the application that's made in past examples. Is that correct?
Well, it's Madam Chair, it's certainly consistent with practice of staff. I don't believe that we've ever had this specific issue come before this committee for a decision, so there's not any kind of actual official decision of this committee on this specific issue. But staff, it's certainly the practice of staff, planning staff, when they're dealing with these applications, that this is what issue means. So certainly they've been dealing with other developers in this way.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This issue is extremely unfortunate, and I think the problem seems to lie more with the ministry in terms of the length of time it took to review this case. In terms of issue, I think when we're looking at how the bylaw is worded, it seems fairly clear that it was issued in January. However, I wanted to ask, it says in the report that the Township of Wilmot does not currently have a community improvement plan in place. And my question is, if they put one in place, would the complainant be eligible for funding through a TIG application?
And Mr. Chair, I'm going to defer to the planning staff as well on that question. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the Township of Wilmot chose to implement a improvement plan that enabled a tax increment grant like there are available in other area municipalities, it is likely that they'd be able to recover some of their costs through that program. They aren't as limited to the 50% through that program. Obviously, in this scenario, there isn't one currently available, so we weren't able to offer that as an alternative that they could go through to recover the rest of their 50% of costs.
And follow up maybe to the mayor of Wilmot. Is this something your council is considering?
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. Chair, am I allowed to respond to that?
Yeah, we're going to try to keep questions directed at Mr. Brooks, but I guess a quick answer to this one may be appropriate.
I would just say that right now, no, nothing's before Wilmot Council. However, I would say it is still a separate issue to what's actually before Regional Council today. Even if we were to implement that, I don't think we're looking for different funding sources versus the actual issue of our bylaw interpretation here.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get to my question, I just want to remind everybody, this isn't a loss of revenue, it's actually an expense when it comes to DC charges. So we have to put the money in if the proponent doesn't do that. So my question to staff is it common, should the applicant have known that it would take 3 to 4 months for the issuance of the document from the time that they had filed the application? I'm concerned, I mean, to me, this falls on the province, but we can't be held responsible for delays from the province. I think they need to take that up with the province. But is this common, this type of delay?
Again, Mr. Chair, I may have to defer to the planning staff who deal with these on a day-to-day basis. But let me say this, just to remind this committee of the chronology. The original submission was made in the summer of 21. Within 2 months, less than 2 months, the ministry advised that the submission did not have sufficient testing. But for that, I would submit that if it had the proper testing, that they would have gotten the letter of acknowledgement, and they would have been put on the registry and issued the RSC number before the January 1st, 2022 deadline. So my submission would be is that part of the problem here was that there was a problem with the RSC submission. And that's unfortunate, but that's partly why we're here today. But I'll hand it over to the planning staff. Thanks.
Through the chair, the record of site condition regulation allows for a 30 business day review period by the ministry to ensure that the RSC submission meets the regulatory requirements. So that was the, the reason for the time period between the November 27th submission and the January 20th issuance of the RSC.
Councilor Liggett, does that answer your questions?
Even if it had been, we're still looking at quite a delay if they had submitted the proper documents, are we not? I'm looking at this delay, and I'm thinking this is just way beyond the pale. Can you please confirm that my thinking here? Whether it's right or wrong, am I right in the direction I'm going?
I'll maybe defer to staff who have more expertise than me, but my understanding is that if they had submitted the original submission in July of 21 and they had the appropriate testing done, that the province was happy with the submission, that they would have received the letter of acknowledgement before January 1st of 22. But I'm not sure. I'll defer to the experts.
I would agree with that through the chair. Just to add to, there is usually some form of comment from the ministry on an initial submission. That's not uncommon. Sometimes it's an administrative change, a change on figures, things of that nature, which could take just a few days. In this case, the ministry identifying a deficiency in the form of insufficient number of confirmatory soil samples required the consultant to go back to the site, collect those samples, have them analyzed at an accredited laboratory, review that data, update their reports. So that does take time in addition to the ministry review periods.
I will just remind our colleagues, I know I've got a couple of folks still in the queue. We are going to hear from the representative from Snyder's Row GP, who I'm sure is anxious to get in and respond to some of these questions as well. So, if there's any further questions directly for Mr. Brooks, I'll entertain those now, and then we'll move on to that.
I have a follow-up, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, and then Councillor Shantz.
Sure. So even after that was all submitted, the timing from that, the correct paperwork, what was that till the ministry actually confirmed that everything was okay? How many months were we looking at?
So through you, Mr. Chair, looking at the chronology, on November 27th, 2021, a second RSC submission was made to the province addressing previous comments. On December 2nd, 2021, there was a notice of receipt from the ministry saying, yes, we received it. And then on January 20th, 22, the RSC acknowledgement letter was issued. So the time period between the second submission and the approval by the province was just under 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and Councillor Hunick also has a question just for your cue there. Mr. Brooks, I think I heard you say that there's a 30-day period from and I took that to mean from November 27th, there would have been a 30-day period. Did I understand that correctly? Or maybe it was someone else who said that.
Yes, through the chair, that was me. It's a 30 business day review period. So there's an allowance in the definition for Sundays and holidays, which includes Saturdays, and then with the holiday season in there at the end of December, I believe it was about 30 business days, maybe a couple days after, but based on that November 27th submission date, 30 business days would certainly put you into 2022 to expect a response from the ministry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, I'm going to go to Councillor, I guess, Hunick, and then over to Salonen.
It's the province delay and not, thank you, Councillor Schatz. If we determine that it's the province delay and not the fault of the region, and the region can't continue to take the fall for the province, is the complainant still at liberty to issue a complaint with the province, with the ministry, as opposed to with the region?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say, I think my response would be is, I don't necessarily think that the province in this case delayed. The province received a submission. They saw deficiencies in the submission. They asked the qualified person, the developer, to correct the deficiency. The developer did that, and in a very timely manner, the province responded. Unfortunately, the timely response by the province approving it was after January 1st, 22. So I wouldn't say that the province was delayed in this matter. I think the point that I would make is that unfortunately there were deficiencies in the first submission that unfortunately got us to this point where we missed the deadline. The developer missed the deadline for the 100%.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I know that we keep on talking about the timelines here. I guess I want to go back to what the spirit of the bylaw itself is and what council of the day when they made the brownfield decision, because I appreciate that it has since changed, what they were trying to achieve for our communities. And I would say that in my interpretation, it would be that we are trying to intensify, we are trying to incentivize people remedying environmental issues in our communities, because this was quite a contaminated site. It had had multiple fires, had a old gas station at one point in time. And I mean, this has really been a huge change for the positive for our community, as well as Homes for All is one of our pillars of our strategic plan. So I guess I'm also struggling with, there can be different interpretations of what day something was issued and whether it's a number that was issued or paperwork that was submitted to the province. But again, I go back to what is the actual spirit that we're trying to achieve, and by having something that I will still say, Mr. Brooks, the province still was past the 30 days, even if you are very generous with holiday days. But if you're going off of official recognized holiday days by the province, they were still well over 10 business days off. Regardless, I really think we need to be looking at what the spirit and the intent here is. Otherwise, I would really just say that our bylaws are for show if we aren't looking to enact the spirit that is behind them.
Okay, I'm going to get on to the, a representative from 162 Snyder's Road GP Inc. So I'll call upon Chris Burnett to come up and make your presentation. And then again, we'll open it back up for community members to ask any clarifying questions. So good morning, Mr. Burnett.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. I wanted to begin by thanking my friend Mr. Brooks for his summary, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you that I agree with the vast majority of what he had to say in terms of the chronology of what happened here and in terms of the core of the dispute. And it really is around the word issued. The one area where I disagree with the way he characterized the process is that he indicated that the ministry issued this notice of acknowledgement. And when you look at the Environmental Protection Act, what's interesting to me as a lawyer, and we are into the legal weeds here, is that when the Environmental Protection Act speaks about records of site condition, it doesn't actually use the word issued. It uses the word certified, submitted, and filed. And the word issued is there, but it's about certificates of property use. And so when we talk about an RSC being issued, that's not a defined term. And I'll get into the meat of that later on, but I think that's a really important context to understand, is that this question is all around when was something issued. And that particular word isn't in the Environmental Protection Act in relation to records of site condition. It's just the filing of the record. And I'll provide some more detail about that later, but I just wanted to give you that context. Before I do, though, I did want to take a step back and just give you some information about the project and the applicant. So yes, I'm here on behalf of a company, 162 Snyders Road GP Inc. And to my left is one of the principals of that company, and that's Mike Ulmer. Mike and his family have been active in the real estate and development industry in Wilmot generally and in the region for 65 years and have been active participants in developing the community in Baden and in Wilmot generally. And some of you may be familiar, if you know Baden, that there's a property on Snyders Road. I think it's on Snyders Road. It's 14 acres. And Mike has actually donated that, and it's going to become a park. It's outside of any requirements of the Planning Act. But that's the individual who's behind the 162 Snyders Road company. And I think it's important for you to understand that we're not just dealing with a numbered company here, but rather an individual who's been a participant and a contributor to the community. I also wanted to talk about the project itself. I wonder if the clerk could just bring up the photograph that I sent. And the councillor referred to this earlier. This is a photograph of 162 Snyders Road as it appeared in 2020. Long history to the property. There was a gas station, a meat market, a landscaping business. That burned down in 2016. And the site sat and looked like that for quite a number of years. And this is what it looks like today, if we could get a photograph. An absolute top-of-the-line, high-quality rental apartment building. And there's another aerial shot is in the next photograph as well. If you could just put that up. And so that's 32 units which have been brought to market. And if you want to talk about housing now, bringing rental units to market is exactly what this municipality, this region, and this town and many others are struggling to do. And this is a project that has delivered in that regard. So to get from photo 1 to photo 2 required a lot of work. A gas station on the property means that there's a lot of remediation that needs to be done. And to go from that vacant use to being able to have residential on the property required, as Mr. Brooks indicated, just over $330,000 in remediation costs. And in undertaking this project, it was the understanding of Mr. Ulmer and of Concept Developments that that was eligible for a credit towards the development charges, and understood that that would be reducing the overall cost of the project. And the councillor spoke about the goal of the brownfield incentive program. And I wondered about that as well. So I went back and looked at some of the old staff reports. And the project actually began almost 20 years ago in 2006. It was reviewed in 2014 and again in 2019 when the region made the policy decision to phase it out. But what I found interesting is that the original reason, the policy behind the program, was to promote compact growth, which utilizes existing infrastructure, to reduce outward expansion, so to intensify within the existing urban boundaries, to mitigate groundwater risks, having an old gas station cleaned up absolutely does that, and to increase tax revenue from what were formerly vacant properties. And that's exactly what's happened here. So in terms of the policy goals of this council, in having a brownfield incentive program, this project ticks all of those boxes in terms of what it's seeking to accomplish. Now, Council has decided to phase the program out, and so in 2019, the bylaw was amended to include this 50% credit if an RSC was issued, and that's the term that's used in the bylaw, after January the 1st, 2022. And Mr. Brooks has summarized the history in terms of the timing, and that's also attached in the letter, which is Appendix D to the staff report, which is a letter from the company that undertook the Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessments. And the chronology is all there. The original submission to the ministry was in July of 2021. And then in September, there was an indication that more testing was needed to be done. So that was undertaken in October and November, diligently and quickly. And then the results had to be reviewed by a lab. And then it was on October the 6th that the certification date was complete. And there's an important part of this process, and it's set out in the Environmental Protection Act and the regulations as well, and it has to do with certification. So effectively, what the remediation does is it takes the site from being permitted to be used for industrial uses, and if you want to use one of those sites for residential, you have to prove that the soil is of sufficiently clean standards, to use layman's terms, because I'm not an engineer, that it's safe for it to be used for residential purposes. And so the qualified person, who is an engineer, goes out and does those tests, and he or she has to certify that the tests are accurate and complete. And they have to seal that with their engineer's seal and say, this is the state of the property, and it is able to be used for residential purposes. And once an RSC is filed, not issued, but filed, then the effective date for when the property can be used for residential purposes is the certification date. So even though the filing happens later, the certification saying you can use this property safely for residential purposes is the date of certification, which in this case is October the 6th, 2021. So Mr. Brooks has indicated quite rightly that when lawyers scratch their heads and don't know what a word means, we do go and look at things like case law. I couldn't find any that assisted us, so they look at dictionaries. Black's Law Dictionary absolutely notes that issued can mean to put forth officially. So I agree with the way in which the councillor framed it, and I think it's entirely accurate and consistent with the definition of the word issued, which includes the word officially. It doesn't say by government body, but to have a qualified person say, as of this date, I am certifying, with all the liability that comes with that, that this property is able to be used for residential purposes, they're issuing that record of site condition. And yes, it has to be reviewed by the ministry, and yes, the ministry has to say, we agree, and yes, the ministry has to file it. But the Act says the date of the ability to use the site for residential purposes is the certification date. And as I mentioned earlier at the outset, the Environmental Protection Act doesn't talk about issuing records of site condition, it only talks about filing them. And one of the things that Mr. Brooks said is lawyers have these principles of statutory interpretation. And what we try and do is look at what's the common sense way in which a particular word might be used. There's another principle of statutory interpretation that says If one word is used for a particular reason, then if a different word is used elsewhere, it must mean something different. And so, since there is no definition of issued in the Environmental Protection Act, and since the only word that's used in relation to an RSC is filed, and absolutely the Act makes clear that the date that an RSC is filed is the January 20th date. There's no doubt that's when it's filed. So then you have to ask yourself, when council changed this bylaw and used the word issued instead of filed, common sense interpretation would tell you issued must mean something different than filed. And if that's the case, then issued has to be a different date than January 20th. And the only other date where something was put forth officially was the certification date. And that's October the 6th. And that obviously falls within the time frame. So there's no doubt that I would say that this is a circumstance in which you've got a respected member of the development community bringing to market something that this council and the municipalities are looking for generally, and that's high quality rental housing, that they did everything that was asked of them in terms of remediating the site, got it all done, they thought, in the middle of 2021, and as is standard, the ministry said, no, you got to go away and tick a few more boxes, and they went out and they did it. And they filed it in November of 2021, and then, not being critical of the ministry, but a statement of fact, things take longer than they should. That final step of filing doesn't happen until January 20th. And so as a result of that bureaucratic slowdown, and yes, the Christmas holidays are in there, everyone's got to take a holiday, but should that burden of that be placed on my client when they did what they were supposed to do, and there is a common sense interpretation of the word issued, which is entirely consistent with what I've put before you. And I hear staff saying what I would call a slippery slope argument. You know, we're going to open the floodgates to millions of dollars of potential claims. Respectfully, I think that's a very narrow possibility, because are there any other developments in the region where there was a certificate, a record of site condition, that was certified and submitted in 2021 that you haven't heard about yet? Surely staff could point to something in particular, and in their report, they're quite candid in saying we can't point to particular examples, but there's a chance. I think that chance is fairly slim. And so what my client is saying is, having done everything it's tried to do, the $160,000, $66,000 in the context of the regional budget, context of development charges is very little. On a project of this size, it makes a big difference to the bottom line. And it was something that was expected in light of the way the matter unfolded. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, but that's my submission with respect to the complaint.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Barnett. I'll ask council to direct questions directly of Mr. Barnett, if you have them. Councillor Foxton.
Chair, it's a comment, not a direction to Mr. Burnett. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Evan.
I actually pushed the button for Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Thank you, Chair Edmund, and thank you, Mr. Barnett, for your report. Can you tell us what percentage of the 32 units are affordable or deeply affordable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, for a project of this size, the economics don't support affordable housing, and so all of the units are market rent.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Mr. Barnett, so with your interpretation of the Environmental Protection Act not having any language regarding issuing, I'm curious, as a municipality, usually in your experience of law, which one holds up most? Is it provincial legislation, or is it bylaws of municipalities if there is a difference of opinion between them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, The Municipal Act actually tells us that where there's a conflict between a provincial statement and a bylaw, the province always prevails. But that's when there's a conflict, and at law, a conflict from an interpretation point of view is really sort of a binary thing. If one says yes and the other says no, if the province says yes and the municipality says no, as City of Toronto has learned, just by way of example, the province will always prevail, given that the municipalities are creatures of statute. So in this case, I don't see a conflict. There's just a gap. And so if there was a definition of issued, then that would be definitive in the Environmental Protection Act. I would say that with the definition of the word filed meaning one thing, that it's reasonable to say issued must mean something else in the bylaw.
Thank you.
Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, just a question with regard to the initial submission to the ministry. And it was turned down by the ministry. There was some boxes to be filled. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what those boxes were, and would you also, that was also signed by a certified engineer as well. Would that engineer have some liability? Is it the same engineer that submitted the second one, the second application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in response to your first question, yes, it was the same engineering firm. With respect to liability, that's a kind of a broader question that I don't really want to delve into, but in terms of the work that was asked to be done, I don't have the specific details, but my understanding is that from the letter submitted that's at Appendix D, that there were more samples that were required. And so the particular requirements of the ministry are we need to have X number of samples tested in a certain way, and the ministry in reviewing it said we need to have more samples in more places in order to be completely satisfied. That's my general understanding, though I confess I don't have the details.
So it would be quite possible that if he submitted a second time, there could be deficiencies again.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the process is set up so that the ministry makes sure that there are sufficient number of samples to ensure, and the whole goal of this is to make sure that we're not building residential and allowing people to live on land that is contaminated, and the system is set up to protect against that.
If I may, but there's no guarantee that that would have been received and accepted the second time around.
Through you, Mr. Chair, but it was.
But it wasn't, yeah, but there's no guarantee that it was.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't understand. No guarantee.
There's a possibility that the second application would have been, may not have ticked all the boxes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your hypothetical.
Yeah.
I see. Through you, Mr. Chair. Is it possible that the second submission could have been sent back for more work? Yes. If that had happened, I don't think I'd be here today because the certification date would have been after January 1st, 2022. And so that's the distinguishing factor is hypothetically, sure. What actually happened was that it was filed and therefore was certified. And I think I'd be hard pressed to say that something that was certified after January 1st, 2022, I don't think that would be issued before that date.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
Hang on. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, when I look at the letter from the ministry on page 18 of our agenda, it says directly in there that the decision on whether the RSC can be filed to the registry will be provided by January 18th. So this letter is actually saying that this is not signed, sealed, and delivered yet, that there's still hoops to be jumped through, and that they are still need to process the record of site condition and the supporting documents. So your client would have known, or you would have known, somebody would have known on December 2nd that it couldn't, that there could be potential delays, and they actually give the date of January 18th and say that the director will give one of the following forms, and then it lists the forms by January 18th. So they actually tell you at that point in time that you're going to be past that deadline. correct? Am I not correct in my interpretation of the letter from the ministry?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Leggett, you are correct. But I'd ask you to pay particular attention to the language. A director's decision on whether the RSC can be filed to the registry. So we knew absolutely in December that the decision could be after January 1st on whether the RSC could be filed to the registry. The question for you is whether that means the RSC was issued on that date. And from our perspective, the RSC was issued by the qualified person in October. And to the councillor's earlier question to my right, if the RSC had come back as negative and had to do it again, then I think that would have been the end of it. But that's not what happened. And so what you have is the retroactive effect that the certification date after filing is the date of when the RSC was issued by the qualified person, which is in October.
Can I have a follow-up, please, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead, and then Councillor Shantz.
So we are sitting here as a council trying to determine whether a property is clean for habitation. And you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to have us make a decision based on the interpretation of a word, when in reality it's whether the site itself is clean and able to be habitated. And that can't, inhabited, sorry. So that can't happen until, in our minds, till the ministry actually says that.
So through...
Can you see our dilemma here?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Leggett, the question is not whether the site can be safely used for residential purposes. It can, and in fact, it is. And that is because the RSC was issued by the qualified person in October and confirmed by the ministry in January when the RSC was filed to the registry. So there's no doubt that the site is properly used for residential purposes, or the chief building official couldn't have issued a building permit. So that question has been definitively answered, and it was definitively answered when the QP, the qualified person, issued the RSC in October, and it was confirmed by the ministry with the filing of the RSC in January.
Okay, so I know, Councillor Shantz, you have a question of our staff. There's no other questions to you right now, Mr. Barnett. I'm going to ask that, or ask if Mr. Brooks, if you have any closing remarks, both sides closing remarks, and then we do have another opportunity for council to ask any clarifying questions. If you're okay, Councillor Shantz will do that. So, Mr. Brooks, do you have any closing arguments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just briefly, I'm not going to go over the argument. I think it's been flushed out, but I was going to respond to a couple things. The developer has said that, well, we have this process where it's filed, and that word filed is really key, but there's another part of that component, and that is the letter of acknowledgement. And the letter of acknowledgement, in our minds, was issued on January 20th. And that letter of acknowledgement, which is set out in the package, the staff report, that letter is acknowledging, and it says, this is confirmation that the RSC is appropriate. Here's the RSC number, and it's going to be filed. So registering on the site is part of it. Issuing the letter of acknowledgement is the other part of it, and I think that's where staff are focusing on. I think that members of this committee have picked up on the fact that the certification date, using that is problematic because it didn't work the first time, and there's a risk it could have been problematic the second time. So focusing on the certification date, I would submit, is a problematic interpretation. Other than that, Mr. Chair, the position of staff is that the word issued was to create a deadline. It's a deadline that's been used in regard to all developers. There is a concern about a precedent if it was to be changed, but it's certainly in the hands of this committee to make that decision. The important thing in my mind on the dates is that there was the deadline both for the 100%, but there's the deadline also for the 50%. And that 50% I think was July of 2024. So theoretically, if someone had theirs RSC certified before July of 2024, theoretically, they're still in the game to get a credit against their regional development charges. And when we now have the changes to the Development Charges Act, where installments are now being spread over 5 years, as it was in this case, where you can make a complaint after an installment, it certainly, we have a kind of a more of an open-ended environment that we're dealing with. So I think that's submissions of staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barnett, do you have any closing remarks?
I think I've said everything I have to say, and I don't intend to be repetitive. So thank you for the opportunity, but I've never said this before, but I will now. I rest my case.
We know you're both friends. Okay, Councillor Shantz, question.
Thank you. I'm trying to think of this in the context of our brownfield policies and development. And when we put in those policies originally, it was to encourage development of brownfield sites to clean up a number of brownfield sites that were throughout the region. And so I guess my one question to staff is, how many brownfield sites have been in the townships?
You don't want to answer that. Can you put your mic down so everybody can thank you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact number, but I would estimate there's between 5 and 10 that would be in the townships, and that would only apply for the RDC exemption. The tax increment grant that we offer as a joint program with area municipalities is only available in one of the townships and then the 3 cities.
Okay, thank you. I guess my comment would be, and I understand the importance of dates and having deadlines and sort of sticking to it. I believe, I don't remember, but I believe we picked January 1st because we wanted to phase it out and that January 1st was a good date. This particular situation seems to be unique in that it crosses over and sort of presses those dates. You know, I'll listen to the rest of the comments, but I see this as a place to make an exemption. It's a site that's been cleaned up. It's a local developer who's worked in the community and with the community, and maybe we're not allowed to make decisions on that basis, but I think this is one that we should think about carefully, even though it does cross that date line in kind of obscure and, you know, language ways.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. A couple of things. Great dialogue. Thank you. I agree with Councillor Nowak that that when they put the second submission through, they did not know if it would be approved or not. They did know the January 18th date. It's right there in the letter dated December 2nd. So they knew that they would be over the time and the new bylaw would be in effect. Why did they not bring this to council then? Why did they not come and say, okay, we've filed December 2nd, they've acknowledged receipt of it, and they've said they're going to get back to us in January 18th. Will you waive the bylaw and allow us to still get the 100%? Why did they wait till 2025? That's one question. The other is, I believe, Mr. Brooks, you stated that there are several other situations like this. I know people think $160,000 is insignificant. I don't, but that's because I don't live expensively. But anyways, I think you give me $160,000, I'll be happy. So how many others with this affect? And who pays it? We know that if this is covered by the region, or waived again, it goes on the taxpayer. How many times are we going to have to put this on the taxpayer to make up for that month? And where do we draw the line? Is it all the ones that went in December to the province that didn't get done until January? And what about the ones that went in December but didn't get done until February? So I need more information to make a really good decision. Thank you.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So, Mr. Brooks, I guess I'm just wondering, since it does come down to the word issued, yet in the documentation from the 20th, the province never references the word issued. So I'm still really confused as to what we would actually say is issued. Because to me, there's nothing that's actually said that this was ever issued through the definition that we're using, because the interpretation of the blacks, again, does not identify it needs to be a government body issuing. So I'm just a little bit caught up on that argument. I can appreciate where it's coming from, and I appreciate the work that staff are doing on this and recognizing, yes, regionally we can't give everything, but I guess I'm caught up in the actual argument that we're making as staff, yet there is no paperwork that says this was ever issued, because that's not language used by the province in reference to the RSC.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, not all words are defined in legislation, and so you can look at what is a common sense approach to look at it. In this case, staff have interpreted that the letter of acknowledgement is evidence that the RSC has been issued. The letter, it's from an official, it has a date for the RSC, it has a number for the RSC. So whether the province in their letter say this is a letter issued, perhaps it doesn't, but that's how staff have interpreted it. And it's up to committee to agree with that position or that interpretation or not.
Okay, thank you. And then one, I guess, maybe follow-up. For our brownfield DCs going forward, can we have this issue remedied using terminology that's not in conjunction with proper terminology? This is more so directed at clerks, if that could come back to council at some point, so that in the future no other council has to deal with problems like this.
Yeah, no, good comment. I don't think our DC bylaw is up until 2026. So I know we've made a couple comments to staff over the course of the year on this. So I hope someone's taking some notes somewhere along the lines that we clean up some of this stuff ahead of our next one or make recommendations. So I don't know if you've got your answer that you're looking for, if we want to move on to the next one. Are you good, Councillor Salmon?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I would just like to thank Mr. Barnett for the tone and the way that you've brought forward the case. It's very collegial, and I appreciate that. The point has already been made by my colleagues, Councillor Foxton and Councillor Liggett, that DCs have to be made up. We don't forego them. And I certainly have been on the side of the desk that the proponent is on, and I know that DCs and TIGs are a huge benefit to building. However, I do think in the spirit of consistency, and I don't object to reviewing the policy, and that happens regularly, and anybody who's been through the DC bylaw update realizes it's really quite vigorous. So I would support dismissing this case, but I would not want the proponent or Osler to think that that is any way a comment on their integrity or their standing within the community. I know you do great stuff, so this is just, I would tell you, upholding a process that belongs to the region.
Councillor Wolf. Oh, sorry. Mr. Brooks, were you going to respond to that? No, okay, you got your mic on. Councillor Wolf. Yeah, you just need to come off mute. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sympathetic to the developer and the whole situation, and I do understand how staff have come up with their decision. I really would like to know more specifically how many other people could apply if we dismiss the charge. So I understand there would be those who had filed before the January 1st deadline, and I can see that you're also talking about the January 24th deadline in terms of companies. But is there any way we could have a more specific answer than just that it could be several? Because it seems to me that we should know fairly specifically who has filed, before the January 1st, 2021, and the 2024.
Staff, you want to try to answer that question? I mean, that might be difficult. As Mr. Brooks had suggested, there probably are those out there that still haven't come forward, but I'll let you do your best to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like you said, it is hard to estimate the number of properties. We also have a second deadline that's outlined in the RDC bylaw. It is July 31st, 2024. So council's intent at the time was to phase out this program and outlined those deadlines. So the 50% exemption expired on July 31st, 2024, and they had to have their RSC before then. So if we were to change the interpretation moving forward, as committee has the opportunity to today, it would impact other properties that are potentially eligible for now this 50% exemption as well. It is hard to estimate if they're in the RSC or in the ministry process right now. We aren't aware of that until the RSC is filed to the registry, so it's hard to estimate if there are other properties and how many there would be. I hope that's what you're looking for.
Hopefully that satisfies Councillor Wolf your question. I will move on. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. When we're considering this sort of thing, I 100% agree with Chair Redmond that I feel that this appeal needs to be dismissed, and I'm going to go with the staff recommendation. What we have to remember is the mess that we're in the middle of right now with the tax increase on the levy to the regional representatives. And we have coming forward the problem with the tariffs and trade mess that's going on. We have companies that are struggling who could be closing down through this. We have people in our region who could be losing their homes, and we've had that recently happen in Cambridge, where we've put residences up for tax sale this month. So when I look at this sort of thing where people knew that they were going to be missing deadlines and we're playing semantics, I cannot put this on the back of taxpayers for something like this. This should have been addressed, and I'm very comfortable with the supporting staff on this one.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Hunick.
Chair Harris, this is a very difficult decision, and I'm just wondering if I can ask Mr. Barnett one more question.
Sure.
Mr. Barnett, what was the impetus for coming to Regional Council in January of 2025 relative to 2024, 2023, 2022, or 2021?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chair, that is a very legal reason, and that is that the Development Charges Act provides that the complaint is to be filed after the development charges are payable. And because of the way the Development Charges Act was amended for rental housing, the first development charge, regional development charge, wasn't payable until I think it was October the 20-something of last year. And so the complaint wasn't ripe, and we couldn't bring it until after the development charge was payable. So it was brought forward at this time, not because we were sitting on our hands, but because there was nothing to bring forward. There was no jurisdiction in the council to make a determination on a complaint until after the first development charge was in fact payable.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. One more question, and we're talking about consistency. So I guess I would ask staff, when have we had this kind of situation where there's been submissions made, paperwork done, and it sort of crossed that time barrier in the past that we can look to for that consistency that we're talking about?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I cannot recall an example where we've had this type of a deadline where there was, filing and so on like that. So I don't think there is a precedent.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask one more question then, and that would be about RSCs in process. The final date was July 2024. That's sort of the end of this whole problem, if you will. That's more than 6 months ago. Is it conceivable, actually, that the ministry is sitting on applications for that long? They've got their 30-day business thing.
Through the chair, yes, it is actually possible. The reason being is that some RSC sites go through what's called a risk assessment process, and that can take many months, many years in some cases. So they may have completed their site testing work before that July 31st, 2024 deadline, which would make them the certification date for the site, is the date they last collected samples from the site. But then they go through the risk assessment process, which has its own review periods with the ministry, has quite a bit of science and toxicology that goes along with that, and that process can take years. So an RSC may be filed in 2025, 2026, that has a certification date back to July 2024.
Can I just follow up one more on that?
Go ahead, your last one.
Yep, thank you. So would that be the same situation here? I mean, there had been work done on the site, so presumably they were pretty confident of what they were going to find when they did additional testing. Would that be the exact same situation as we have here, or would that be a different kind of situation? Sorry, forgive me for not knowing this, the science behind it all, but that would spread out over months or years.
It would be a different situation in that the 162 Snyder site went through a remediation process rather than a risk assessment process. So the samples that were collected on October 6th proved that the site was clean according to the QP certifications, whereas this hypothetical site that goes through a risk assessment, its certification date would be confirming the maximum concentrations of contaminants that are remaining. And that's why then the risk assessment process is triggered and you go through that. They would be similar in that the property cannot be used for the intended use, say of residential use, until the ministry acknowledges the RSC. That's the trigger for things like building permits. It doesn't backdate to the certification date. You need to go through the risk assessment in order to have that ministry acknowledgement and the issuance of the RSC to change the use.
So it's a different process, really. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, that's all the questions I have. So I will ask for a mover and a seconder, and we'll vote on the recommendation moved by, pardon me? We've already got a move by Councillor Foxon, seconded by Councillor Erb. So colleagues, I'll let the clerk staff put that up on your screens. We'll go to Okay, colleagues, that staff recommendation does carry. As you can see the screen, the vote there. Okay, we have some delegations, I believe. I'm just going to look through that. So I'll call upon David Marskell from the museum. David, you've got 5 minutes. I'll allow the clerk a minute just to get the presentation put up, and once you see that up, you can begin your presentation. Good morning, David. I think you just got to push the button. Green is good.
Got it. Good morning. Thank you very, very much. I will be quick. I just came today to thank council for helping open the museum just over 20 years ago, and the Waterloo Region Children's Museum, and your ongoing support of the museum. I also wanted to give a quick update. Next slide, please. That for those 20 years, we have worked hard to awe-inspire and enlighten this community. Next slide, please. And to bring truly world-class exhibitions. Next slide, please. To the community. I'd love to know your favorite exhibition or experience we brought. I certainly know Doug Craig's was Titanic. And we've brought amazing things to the community. Next slide, please. And what we've created with your support along the way is a very experiential, bold place of play and exploration. We've celebrated the DNA of this community of technology with science and at a place to enjoy and create artistic content. We've also attracted 1.6 million people since we've been open. About 500,000 of those people have been from outside of the region, so we've really helped the local economy. And our brand is known across, certainly in the cultural sector, across Canada. Next slide, please. 2 years this March will be the anniversary of our opening the only permanent digital immersive space outside of Toronto in southwestern Ontario. iPool is really amazing. The images you're seeing here were created by an Indigenous digital artist, and if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to come and see iPool. We now have a bit of a collection with 4 or 5 different experiences, including an annual competition with the Conestoga College students. Next slide, please. With your support, we have, as I've said, hosted up over 1.6 million people from school groups across the region. We are relevant, and we continue to grow those numbers after COVID, getting ourselves back to the numbers that we were before COVID. You can see the different stats and so on there. I know you've had this deck for a while. Next slide, please. Shared resources is critical in our mind to the arts and culture sector. We have been reaching out in the last 45 days to this list of groups to work with them to share resources, to cross promotions, anything we can do to build bridges in the sector. Next slide, please. We have been working hard towards sustainability and to refocus what we want to be in the future. And we want to double down on art and technology at play. That experiential institution to build out our underground studio makerspace and to ultimately have digital content creation by all ages. Next slide, please. We have been working very, very hard, and this is a key part of what I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you know this, but going back to last spring, last April, we met with City of Kitchener staff basically on a weekly basis and with the mayor and CEO of City of Kitchener on a monthly basis to find priorities for a sustainable future. We looked at a number of different models and we took them through financial analysis and so on, and we're continuing to work with the city, and I hope that we'll have a positive outcome later this month. Next slide, please. We're doing this to make the community a smarter place, and to complete the circle for global competitiveness. Thank you. Next slide, please. And as I said at the beginning, thank you very much. I just wanted to really say that. You've supported us along the way. You created us at the beginning 21 years ago as the Waterloo Region Children's Museum, and we're on our feet swinging, and we appreciate your support. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, David. I don't have any questions as of right now on that, but appreciate your presentation. I'll also call up upon Dennis Longchamp now from the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery. Denis, you've got 5 minutes as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Here we go. So, thank you. It's my annual visit to update you about the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery. We're a national gallery. Next slide, please. We're a national gallery that's recognized by the Canadian Museum Association as well as funding agencies for artistic visions and programming such as the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Art Council, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and the Canadian Heritage. We present national exhibition with artists from all across Canada as well as regional exhibition with local artists. We're working right now on 3 international exhibitions, community programming for all audiences, small staff, totally dedicated, who does work a great deal, and we're funded by the region since 2024. Next slides. And thanks to that grant, we were able to create 2 new full-time positions, a graphic designer and marketing coordinator, as well as a visitor experience and volunteer coordinator. Next slide. So exhibition and program, we do 16 exhibitions per year, approximately. And we continue to engage with diverse audience through diverse programming. Lumen last year brought 1,600 visitors for the exhibitions, 600 visitors for Waterloo last week, as well as 8,000 participants in our workshops. Next slide. We do have a stunning exhibition right now. It's 3 generations of Indigenous artists, the Beam family, and it's a stunning exhibition. It's Carl Beam going back to his sources and finding archaeological site where he discovered that there was Indigenous pottery making in Manitoulin Island, and then the 3 generation follows. Next slide. Fruits by Julie Boone. Julie is engaging with South Korean practice in still life and created it in 3D in ceramics. Next slide. Our Emerging Talent series, which we started 4 years ago, present Jamie Kroger, who is a scientist specializing in avalanche in British Columbia, but decided to engage with enamel work. Next slide. And 12 collaboration by Timothy Lauren. We invited 12 artists of different disciplines to work with him. So what we're seeing right now is the collaboration with an archaeologist who provided him with a drawing of a shards that she found on a site. Next slide, probably what I'm most proud of last year. Sharing experiences, we invited A Better Tent City to come and work with us, and we work with the resident and the staff of A Better Tent City. It was quite a humbling experience to hear the stories of how people ended up at A Better Tent City. It was so successful. Next slide. We invited the resident to come and work on a project of creating ornaments for the season, holiday season, and we sold them, and all the proceeds went to the participants. Next slide. We do have a program called Gather at the Gallery for 55 plus, which started once a month, then twice a month, and now we're offering it every week, and it's always sold out. Next slide. We did a conference in January this year, Ceramics and Glass Sustainability and the Environment, and we had 2 keynotes, one from the US, Robert Everson, who wrote a book on sustainable ceramics, as well as one from Scotland, Hazel Frost, who wrote The Art of Sustainability. It was very well attended, and it's something that we plan to do more often. Next slide. Some of our accomplishment in 2024, we did increase our grant revenues. We received 2 grants from the Ontario Trillium Foundation, one from around $25,000, $25, I wouldn't go very far, $25,000 for capital to get furniture that is allowing people in wheelchairs more accessibility and more comfort to be able to participate in our workshop, as well as furniture for the family center, and a seed grant for $85,000, which will allow us to animate the family centers every Saturday and Sunday for free for the families. It started 2 weeks ago, and it's already very popular. And we just received the news last week that we're getting $25,000 from New Horizons for seniors from the federal government to continue our program Gather at the Gallery, but this time with a different twist, where we will invite people to discover culture through their craft and food. So our numbers of visitors and participants went up by 20%, sorry. And finally, we're getting media attentions, more so with the Painting with Clay exhibition. We already been through 6 different media. And the 25th anniversary of the Chance Award is this year's, and we were invited by the Australian magazine Ceramics, Art and Perception to submit the history of the Chance Award. And I've got 2 chapters in books coming up, published by Bloomsbury Publishing from the UK. One is about LGBTQ programs that we do at the gallery, which will be in a book called Craft is Political. And the second one about our engagement with diverse community for a book called Home and Craft. Upcoming events and exhibition. It's the 25th anniversary of the Winifred Chance Award, and now we're offering $10,000 to the winner, followed by $5,000 for the runner-up, and 3 prizes of $1,000 for the finalists. Most importantly, Beyond the Threshold, the fall exhibition, Engaging with Homelessness. It's a national exhibition. 16 artists have been selected from all across Canada to engage with this social issue.
Denis, we're running close on the end. We are out of time, so I'll let you just wrap it up, and then I have a couple questions for you.
That's okay. Next slide is thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. We do have a couple questions, Denis. So you want to stay at the mic, Councillor McCabe?
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Denis. Hi. And I understand that you're going to be retiring, so you're certainly with the outline of the accomplishments from 2024 and certainly previous, and what you have coming up in 2025. It looks like you're going out on really at a high point. So thank you very much for the time and effort and energy that you've put into really developing the gallery. Just a quick question about the Gather at the Gallery. Pardon me. Have you been in touch with the age-friendly committee about that? Well, like the part with the seniors, the New Horizons grant? And if not, I can connect you.
No, but I'd love to be connected.
Okay. Because I think that might be something that's really of interest to them. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I look forward to the event on Friday night on Valentine's.
Thank you.
Sounds romantic. Councillor.
You're not invited.
Okay. I have a son's birthday that day too, so we got a double duty. But Councillor Hewinik, actually Tom Galloway's birthday is on the 14th. Councillor Hewinik.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I think one of our very important responsibilities as elected officials is to raise awareness about gems like the museum and the Clay and Glass Gallery throughout our community. And I apologize that I haven't been at the Clay and Glass Gallery for about 6 months now. That's not normal for me. But anyway, it's really inspiring and exemplary to learn about all the different collaborations you've made. And thank you for continuing to think about things like accessibility to various populations, like a better tent city and those with disabilities. Thank you for those things. And we'll see you soon.
Chair Redmond.
I just want to add my voice of appreciation and say, I wonder if your profits have gone down that Councillor Hewinik hasn't been there for 6 months. I well recall being in attendance when Prime Minister Chrétien was doing a sod turning for Perimeter Institute, and it was done at the Clay and Glass Gallery, and his comment was, I must make sure my wife never comes here. So thank you for consistent, excellent programming and showcasing the best and brightest. And I'm coming to one of your teas, but I won't be there Friday night.
Thank you.
Denny, that's all we've got. Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate that. We've got our regular agenda that will now move to 7.1 strategic priority, equitable services and opportunities. I'll call upon Connie McDonald, Commissioner, Resident Experience, Strategy and Communications, to speak to the report. Connie.
Great. Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm pleased to kick off the next item, and I'm joined by a number of colleagues who together will provide our 2024 annual update on our multi-year accessibility plan progress. Next slide. Improving the accessibilities of our policies and services is an ongoing focus at the region. It's central to our 4 Growing with Care priorities and at the heart of our mission as a regional government. Every person in Waterloo Region relies on us to provide essential services, and that means everyone who calls Waterloo Region their home, workplace, or play or learning space. Ensuring our services are truly accessible takes a whole organization working together. Our equitable services and opportunities strategic priority helps us do that with shared goals and work that we all work together to achieve. Improving accessibility only happens when working alongside those with lived experience and with our partners to improve a system that is currently fraught with barriers. An example of this great work that we do with partners in the community was the recently celebrated 20th anniversary of the Grand River Accessibility Committee, and also working closely with the Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee, both which are vital to our work. This is an ongoing journey and a continuous cycle of improvement, and today we'll walk you through our accomplishments for 2024 and speak to a bit of what's in store for the next year. With that, I'd like to introduce Jenny Walker, our Program Manager in Resident Experience. While Jenny is a longtime regional employee, this is her first time at the podium, and she's played such an important role in helping us at the region work on our multi-year accessibility plan. Also presenting with her are 2 familiar faces. We'll have Ryan Pettipier, our Director of Housing Services, and my esteemed colleague, Doug Spooner, Commissioner of Transportation Services. Both Ryan and Doug represent services that we often hear about when talking about accessibility and the diverse needs of our growing community. Jenny, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Connie, and thank you for having me this morning. So accessible service, next slides, please. Yeah, thank you. So accessible services and spaces are important because it is estimated that between 20 and 25% of residents in Ontario and in Waterloo Region have a disability. So disabilities can be present from birth, caused by an accident, or developed over time, and includes both visible, such as mobility disabilities, and non-visible, such as learning and developmental. Disabilities also vary from person to person, so a group of people with a similar type of disability do not always present the same. We also recognize that people are diverse, and one way our diversity is expressed is through a spectrum of physical, developmental, and mental abilities, makeups or identities, and ways of experiencing the world. We acknowledge that how we structure our spaces, services, and policies can make it difficult for some of us to fully participate and belong, and this is something we want to change. We are guided by our vision to be a compassionate community that cares for all people and where everyone has the opportunity to live a good life. This means ensuring our services and spaces are accessible for people with disabilities, which enables participation in the community, such as getting where we need to go, having accessible and suitable housing, and creating a sense of belonging within our region. Next slide, please. So the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or the AODA, is an Ontario law that organizations must follow to make services and public spaces accessible for people with disabilities. The AODA has 5 standards that we follow, and the region of Waterloo is responsible for ensuring regional services and public spaces follow these 5 standards, so we are accessible for people with disabilities. The 5 standards are design of public spaces, customer service, information and communications, employment, and transportation. So while we are required to follow the AODA legislation, we want to follow it because we know it lays the foundation and gives us a starting point from which we can further build upon to achieve our goals in Growing with Care. At this time, I would like to take a few moments to speak about the January 1st, 2025 deadline that is in the AODA. So as defined by the process, the 2023 audit through the Provincial Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility found that we are compliant with the AODA legislation. However, this does not mean our work is done. In our strategic plan, Growing with Care, one of our priority areas is equitable services and opportunities, where we strive for more equitable service experiences for residents in our community, which guides us to go beyond the minimum requirements of the AODA legislation to continue to improve accessibility. We also know that expectations for services evolve, and we need to evolve with those expectations to continue removing barriers to our services and spaces. Next slide, please. On this slide are two guiding pieces of legislation that offer the foundation on which we build accessibility improvements. So the Ontario Building Code, or the OBC, covers the accessibility of indoor spaces, such as washrooms, hallways, and doorways, whereas the AODA, under Design of Public Spaces, covers outdoor spaces, such as paths of travel, ramps, and curbs. In addition, our accessibility design standards continue to be incorporated into renovations and new construction projects, and improvements are implemented within existing spaces based on audit findings. Next slide, please. A highlighted list of our 2024 accomplishments can be found in the council report. These efforts span from leveraging funding from other levels of government for extensive upgrades in our buildings to increasing accessible taxis and improving services at our airport. All our highlighted accomplishments support us to build the caring and connected community we are striving for in Growing with Care. At this time, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues from Housing and Grand River Transit, who will talk you through some highlights in their improvement journeys.
Thanks, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be in front of you this morning, committee and chair. We'll talk a little bit about some of the accessibility features that we're incorporating into our Waterloo Regional Housing revitalization projects. You go to the next slide. So the image that you're seeing on this slide is a pretty close to real-time progress of King's Court. This is a redevelopment project in the city of Waterloo. We're expecting to have occupancy there late this summer and early spring. And as we work through accessibility needs and requirements in a project like this and all of our subsequent builds, we're guided by a number of standards, requirements, and guidelines overall. Those can look like the Region of Waterloo Accessibility Design Standards, our own affordable housing design guidelines that we have in Waterloo Regional Housing, or the funding requirements from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation that all guide us in terms of the accessibility features that go into buildings like this. Next slide, please. In terms of what that winds up looking like in number of units for accessibility, you can see that on the chart on the right-hand side of this slide. When we're going about the redevelopment, we're prioritizing a number of things. We're prioritizing affordability, we're prioritizing energy efficiency, and for the purpose of today, we're also prioritizing accessibility. And in doing so, we're trying to do more than just the minimum standards on any of those three areas. For example, if we were strictly following the Ontario Building Code, we'd only be putting in basic accessibility features on about 15% of the units overall. And you can see how we're not only meeting that, we're exceeding it across the board in all of our redevelopments. We also don't just provide the accessibility features in one unit type. Often in the private sector, you'll see accessible units in one bedrooms or two bedrooms. We're putting accessible units in across our bedroom sizes in our buildings, from 1 bedrooms all the way up to 5 bedrooms in trying to meet the needs of our community as a whole. In arriving at these targets and features, we do a lot of consultation. Specifically for these builds, that means meeting with members of the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee or the Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee to review the drawings and review the plans with these groups and get really valuable feedback that we ultimately incorporate into the building. Staff have also learned and heard from residents directly through our tenant liaison committees. And these are volunteer committees made up of existing tenants, either in the buildings or the community, that have accessibility needs of their own. and meeting with them alongside staff and the architect. It's that feedback from those committees that we use to shape the design principles for our buildings overall. Next slide, please. The layout that you're seeing here on the screen is an example of a one-bedroom accessible unit at Langs Drive in the city of Cambridge that'll be incorporated there. We've been using the term enhanced accessible units to refer to the types of features that we're implementing in our builds. And this is a terminology that came to us after meeting with the GRAC. And a member of that committee told us very clearly that accessibility needs differ for everyone, and that we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. And instead, what we should be focusing on is putting as many accessibility features into these units as is possible to meet current and future needs of our tenants, whatever those are going to be. You'll see on the left-hand side of the slide a number of those features that we are incorporating in these units, from wall ovens to roll-in showers and roll-under vanities. From kitchen counters that are lowered, as well as cooktops, and wheelchair turn radius as well. I'm going to pass it over to Doug from here, but thanks for your time and listening to some of the accessibility features that we're building into these buildings.
Thanks, Ryan. Council, I'll start with a thank you to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee and our community partners. I'm going to tell you about a lot of accomplishments for Grand River Transit this year, but all have come with the support and suggestion of our community. The first is we're nearing the completion of our Mobility Plus business plan, so broad consultation on that. It will come to you, Council, in April. And we're hopeful that it's the transformational change that we're seeking in terms of the delivery. Next, you'll recall that last February, you had approved the bus stop guidelines for Grand River Transit, so that is looking at the integration of bus stops into the streetscape and making sure that they're accessible. This year, we are also able to upgrade 42 landing pads. We now have 81% of all stops with pads. That's a 13% increase from 2023. We're continuing to accelerate that with just a quick reminder that all of our roads are not actually eligible for pads, so that the target isn't 100% there. And the next one was a relook at our vehicle layouts. So we've been able to shift some of those pieces to address both vibration and noise concerns. We've been able to make more space and really shift the weight of the vehicle to the back. That'll be another update coming in the business plan, is the exploration of the types of vehicles that we will procure in future to provide that service. If we go to the next slide, please. We've also, on the more customer-facing and experiential side, we've updated the Mobility Plus eligibility application. So working with the resident experience group, we feel like we've been able to simplify and streamline it. We've also introduced the PAL card, which is a personal assistant card already in use by Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo, as proof of eligibility for GRT's +1 card. So there's no additional eligibility requirement for a support worker. And finally, Council, with your support, we also upgraded the existing software system. You'll recall that was a discussion about making the most of our existing bus and operator resources. So we've done an upgrade. We're continuing to explore replacement software. And Council, as always, with GRT, we're a continuous improvement organization, so we're not done there. Later today, you'll hear more about our work with Neuron and the start of an adaptive vehicle pilot, their first and our first. And you'll also hear the results of some of the work we did with GRAC that will add infrastructure elements into Fairway Station to support low and no vision customers, so a direct project outcome. That's it for me, thanks.
Right. In closing, I will highlight a few of our plans for 2025, more details of which can be found in the council report package for you. So 2025 will be a busy year for us as we continue along this journey of ensuring people with disabilities in our community have equitable access to our services and spaces. As part of the 2025 plan and budget process, Council received the results of the Ipsos community survey that was conducted in 2024. The data told us that we still have improvements to make, and we are looking forward to more dialogue with those with lived experience to make the necessary improvements to reduce the barriers they experience when accessing services. Helping us with that work will be a new position created through your leadership. An accessibility advisor position as part of the READY team was created as part of the 2025 plan and budget process, and this important role will help us increase coordination of accessibility efforts and increase engagement of those with lived experience to make improvements across the organization. I'm excited to see this work unfold into 2025. So thank you, and that brings us to the end of the presentation.
Okay, we've got council questions. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I have a question for each of the presenters, but they're different. And so I might have to go back in the queue a couple times, which is okay. First of all, I want to commend the work of GRAC and the work of staff and the work of this council toward accessibility. It is because of all of us that I live and enjoy the most freedoms in the country. And so I'm really, really thankful for that. In spite of the great work that we've done, I want to bring your attention back to the Ipsos poll, which indicated that people with disabilities in our region are one of the groups that experience the most barriers when accessing regional services. So as Ms. Walker stated, we still have more work to do in spite of the fact that Ontario was supposed to be fully accessible 6 weeks ago. It's not, but our region is getting there for sure. So my question for Ms. Walker, if I can just start there. Ms. Walker, the MyApp report indicated that there were 15 members on GRAC, but I think there are 15. I think there are 16. Could you clarify that? And also a question as to if one of the goals of GRAC is to make the region consistently accessible, with the exception of Cambridge, which has its own accessibility advisory committee, then why is it that the administrative responsibilities of GRAC reside with the city of Kitchener? Should it not be a regional responsibility?
Thank you, Chair Harris. I might take that question for Ms. Walker, if that's okay. Just looking, is it 16 or 15?
Yes, so the current GRAC membership starting in January 2025 is now 16. When the original MyApp multi-year accessibility plan was developed, we were at 15 at the time. So that can be corrected and adjusted.
Perfect. I just want to make sure everyone is acknowledged is all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And then in terms, Councillor, of the question regarding administration, there are a number of different partnerships where we work very closely with our area municipalities, and we share administrative duties across all of those. So the City of Kitchener is currently the administrative lead, which we are grateful for, and it would be up to the committee if they wanted to change the administrative duties, but we certainly try to take our turns in terms of who is leading which work.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Harris, I'll go back in the queue if that works for you.
Back in the queue, Chantal will go. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much, staff, for all the work that you're continuing to do on this. It's really great to hear. I was just curious in terms of a lot of the accessibility you were talking about is very much spatial accessibility. I'm curious about more so for people with disabilities like learning disabilities or reading disabilities, how we're accessible, if anyone could speak to that.
No, that's okay. Okay. So through the chair. So I will say that, yes, there is a lot of focus on physical disabilities and mobility disabilities. That is definitely something that we want to change as we become more aware and educated and informed about the other non-visible types of disabilities. So continuing work in that area, yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Spooner and Mr. Petitpierre, so maybe I'll address Mr. Spooner first. He's closest to the mic. You said not all roads are eligible for pads. Is that because of the distance between the curb and the right-of-way, or what's the reason for that?
Through you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor. It's actually due to the way that we build roads to the rural standard. So if you think about a road with a soft shoulder, the pad would be the only thing existing in that space. So we'd have to build up, potentially do some sewer work, and then you wouldn't have a sidewalk connection. So you'd literally just have a soft shoulder gravel and then a pad and then continuing soft shoulder gravel. So it's the road condition, and as we do continued capital projects on the roads, we'll make those upgrades. But it's that rural standard versus the urban standard.
Okay, so what you're saying, that's something that's going to be taken into consideration for future developments. Good.
Absolutely, and especially as we advance the township transit plan, that will become a key consideration.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Can I ask Mr. Petitpierre? Yeah. Thanks. It's great to know that we're exceeding the provincial requirements. When we talk about accessibility, is it simply the physical challenges or what Councillor Salonen was referring to, or accessibility, do we consider we want to have as many 3 or 4 bedroom or 5 bedroom apartments as well? Like, is it also accessibility in the number of people that we can accommodate? Does that come into this mix at all?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so spoke to a bit before. When we look at the unit size mix, that's really one that we're trying to make match the needs and the demands of our community as well. So the accessibility features and the number of units that we are creating in each building would span across the unit sizes as well. So there would be accessible 1 bedroom, accessible 2 bedroom, accessible 3, 4, and up to 5 bedrooms in these new builds that we're creating through the revitalization plan.
My question, I think, was related to the number of bedrooms, and not necessarily that they're accessible, but the number of families that we can serve because they have a big family. So if they didn't have any physical challenges at all in that family, do we take that into consideration?
Correct, and thank you for the clarity as well. So those bedroom mixes will also be spread across our redevelopment projects as well. We're trying to create larger bedroom sizes. It's a growing demand in this community for larger families. Most of our redevelopments will have mixes that span from 1 to 5 bedrooms in size, and the number of those units in some cases is still being addressed. But for example, in the King's Court picture that I showed, that will not only have accessible units in the 5 bedroom range, but it'll also have units that wouldn't be considered accessible from 1 to 5 bedrooms as well.
Okay. And then the second question, I think my memory is correct. On the Bechtel Street project in Cambridge, when we did those containers, 50% of them were accessible. Is that right?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. You're testing my memory as well on that one. So there were 6 units created at the time. One of them for sure is accessible. I'm not sure if there's 2, but it wasn't up to 50% though. That would be high.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, and thank you to all the staff who presented today and for this report. It's really important, as some other councillors here have already articulated. Just a couple of questions. With the universal design standards, like when we're designing, new affordable housing or supportive housing, why do we limit it to just 25% or 30%? Is this because of cost? Does it cost a tremendous amount more to build accessible housing units, whether they're 1, 2, 3, 4 apartment buildings? I'm just wondering, 20% or 30% or 19% that were listed are certainly great that we're exceeding provincial guidelines, but I'm just curious why we don't design universally for any age, stage, and ability.
Walked slowly to the podium there in case anybody else wanted to take that one, councillors. Thanks for the question through you, Mr. Chair. There is a cost factor, absolutely. It's more expensive to create units of this type. In the same regard, it's more expensive to create 2, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units as well. And that's why in the private market, you don't see the same type of a standard being built to as what we're trying to accomplish here. Cost factor aside, there's nothing stopping us from exceeding those percentages that we're already above sort of the minimum standard of building code, for example, overall. So we try to take all of those factors into consideration, as well as looking at the wait list, working with the accessibility committees, and trying to set the right mix that we think is going to work for the general population that's looking to access our buildings and need that level of affordability overall. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I mean, I figured it was a cost issue. I'm just also really mindful that, we're all aging and our abilities are all, declining or changing as we age. And for a lot of people who are aging in place, what was a suitable apartment, affordable unit, will become likely inaccessible for them as they continue to age. So just wondering if we could, I just think we should keep that in mind as we build these, because a lot of people don't move out. I think a lot of people don't move out of an affordable housing unit, and their abilities continue to decline. And my other question was just, I know at the City of Waterloo, we've done some education sessions with GRAC, where we've had one or two or three of their committee reps come with council and with senior staff, and we've done, we've gone through a building, or in one case we went from City Hall through uptown and then into another one of our rec facilities. And it really was helpful to really see in real time, things that in some cases, unfortunately, had recently been done, but not quite, anyway, there was still some deficiencies. Certainly in an older building like our City Hall, there's lots of deficiencies. But just wondered if the committee, if staff or council could consider taking the time to do something like that through an education session, because I think they're really valuable. So I don't know if Ms. McDonald, do you want to take that, or just Chair, you want to take that away?
Sure, through the chair, I think that's a great idea, and staff can take that away.
Okay, thanks. And then my quick comment is, I know we do an awful lot of advocacy, particularly through the chair, but also individual councillors and heads of council, and just want to make sure that we keep issues around accessibility as a key piece of our advocacy to the province, because as we know, the initial promise was that, or hope that we were supposed to be, fully accessible by 2025. We know that that certainly has well missed the mark, despite how much improvement there's been in a region like ours. But I think if I got the number right, there's only about 25 or so staff across the entire province who investigate, whether small businesses or facilities are RAODA compliant, and so that certainly is not enough when you think of the entire province of Ontario. And so just want to send that message to our provincial counterparts to say, we need to just step up on this as well. But thanks again for all the good work.
Councillor Williams.
Oh, thank you. So through the chair, there's just one kind of issue that keeps popping up that comes in my email inbox. People call me about it all the time, and I see it personally. And also, just before that, thank you for everybody doing all the great work. There's some pretty exciting things going on, so I'm very excited about that. But this is specifically with GRT, and I know it's kind of out of everyone's hands, but snow. So sometimes, the bus stop gets cleared, but then the plow goes by, and it creates a wall of 2 or 3 feet of snow. There's a lot of seniors in my neighborhood. They absolutely cannot get over 3 feet with their walkers. So I've seen them just kind of get to the bus stop, turn around, go home because they can't access it. So I'm not sure exactly what we could do, except for maybe try to be more staff, more frequency. And I know sometimes they rely on people reporting, but sometimes it just doesn't get reported. And so I'm just really concerned because it's really, really, really hard, especially with the snow coming. And we're supposed to get more snow, and it's probably just this winter. Last year we got really lucky; we didn't have a lot of snow. So I was just wondering if there was a plan to try to clear the bus stops a little more frequently, just to double check on them, or if there's anything coming up. One suggestion that I got from someone, which was actually kind of interesting, I don't know if it's doable, but have a staff member on the bus with a shovel, and if they come to a stop that's not accessible, that person can hop off,
Through you, Chair, and Councillor Williams, thank you for the question. Very relevant topic this week. I think the challenge lies in a few places. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 2,500 bus stops in the GRT network. As you know, last year, Council, we moved our maintenance standard for snow removal from 72 hours after snowfall to 48 hours after snowfall. There remains a challenge here in the provincial guidelines on how we clear roads. We clear roads from the inside out. So we start with the roadway, then bike lane, then sidewalk and bus stop. We do have a bit of a plan and a bit of a discussion to be had this year. Residents will notice that the bus stop is cleared by a different contractor than the sidewalk. So there might be an efficiency conversation to be had there about just having those done at the same time. The other options are to look at frequency level. When we did that, the move to a 24-hour cleaning standard would have meant 2 trips. So it would have been a doubling of the contract amount. So all of that to say, we're well aware of the word windrow. That is the small little piece of snow that gets in the way of everybody moving. We've got to address it. It remains in plan for this year to keep looking, but we don't have a solution that I can put in front of you yet. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I'll take the liberty just quickly, and I know we're somewhat off topic now with some snow clearing, but I just want to thank all of our snow operators, the region, the city staff that complement the regional roads and the city streets, as well as our contractors. We have had, an enormous amount of snow events this year. And I can tell you, driving outwards from outside of the region into the region, I always know when I hit the region because our roads have been in such good shape. And we want to thank those operators for putting those long hours in at night and some difficult, awful conditions. We're probably going to get another one here in the next few days. And so just thank you to all the staff, city, regional especially, because that's who we are, contractors for just doing such a great job. So just want to toss it out there. And with that, I'll go to Councillor Foxon.
Thank you. You missed the townships. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. So one of the townships was doing Wrigley Road, and he looked at something off in the snowbank. And what had happened was a car had done a hit and run, and it was a young woman's body. And she was okay. He was able to get her out and get the police and ambulance there. And she's still struggling, but she's doing better. But what a great thing that he looked, that he saw, and that he went, and he should be commended for that. And that was a regional councillor, our regional snowplow. And I thank them for that.
Definitely don't want to miss our township snow operators as well.
Of course, I know, Mike. I'm just needling you. A couple of things. So Dorothy was talking, in the beginning of your report, you stated 20 to 25% of the people are disabled, and that's the standard number that we go by. I believe it was in your beginning of the report. So Dorothy was asking the number. The other thing is checking for AODA compliance with businesses. Our building departments do that. My building staff go out regularly and make sure buildings have met the AODA certification. If they haven't, they tell them they have to. So it's not just 24 throughout the province. It's our building departments that also cover that. And seniors housing also, if you're moving into a lot of seniors residents, for instance, our Kirkland one, it's built for the accessible. And so I think we miss a lot of good things that have already happened. And so I think we need to point out that we are doing pretty darn good. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And we always have to be watchful. But we're getting there. Thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. This is just a cautionary message. When I saw the AED graphic, I was reminded of a friend who recently told me of a situation where someone suffered a heart attack. They tried to get the defibrillator. They couldn't get it out of the case. They had to break the case. When they got it to the person, the battery was dead. So a cautionary tale to our staff and to our township staff everywhere that please make sure those are accessible and usable.
Councillor Hunick.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Spooner, you referenced some great improvements of GRT, including the integration of the PAL card and the +1 card. Perhaps you could speak to how that's going and future iterations of that, as well as improvements to the layout of the buses and the vibrations and the noise that are causing problems for operators and customers alike. What can we do about those things?
Through you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Hunick. Chair Harris, may I just quickly acknowledge a thank you on behalf of my team. I think everybody knows all of the snow and the maintenance staff in the region are really proud of the work we do. We say we encourage people to stay in and then we go out. So it is a point of pride, and thank you for acknowledging. Councillor Hunick, the PAL card is a first step of implementation. So what happens now, somebody applying for the +1 card, again, the +1 card is a support person traveling with the customer. You simply have to provide that registration number now. So there is no additional questions asked. If you have a PAL card, we will issue you a +1 card. The reason for still wanting the +1 card is that we can then gather data on number of travelers. So it's a data question. Is that the most key feature? I'm not sure. So we'll continue to look at better integration of that PAL card. Again, the sense being, if someone has a PAL card in their hand, they already know what they're going to do, and we need to get them on the bus to provide that service. In terms of the vehicles, Council, you remember we've had lots of discussion about the R-Box style vehicle. So that is the cutaway. You'll recall that we used to have a lift at the back of the bus that would actually lift people up. That provided a lot of weight in the back of the bus. And when we moved to the R-Box model, which now has a front ramp, our customers are experiencing increased vibration and also increased noise because there's straps that we use to strap in chairs, and so it's loud. You'll also recall that I had actually gone and done a ride-along, and I did some unofficial vibration testing. We actually then formalized that and did some vibration testing, and that's what resulted in the relocation of the seats. So what we looked at a number of options. One of them was actually placing a metal bar under the back of the bus to mimic the weight of that the former elevator. That would have had impacts on our fuel consumption and others. So the layout, and this might sound a bit crude, is to actually put more people towards the back of the bus so that we have more weight above that rear axle that will then reduce the vibration and the associated noise. So kind of two next steps on that one in the spirit of continuous improvement. We're going to take a look at the straps and what's actually creating the noise. Do we need those number of straps? Is there something we can put around them as a wrap or sort of to limit that vibration and noise? And the second one is actually coming out of the business plan, which is an exploration of the vehicle type. So remember, the Mobility Plus challenge is making sure we have the number of seats for mobility devices as well as the appropriate capacity to move people. So there may be an opportunity in some cases to look at a smaller van type or a different van type, continuing to look at those R-Box with a different layout to try and address all of the unique needs that the team did a good job of laying out. Councillor Hunick, I hope that answered the question. Lots more to come.
It did. I have more, but it's all good. You're good. Thank you.
All right.
And can I just note, Commissioner Spinner, I've experienced some pretty dangerous encounters recently where I go up to a regional push button crosswalk on a regional road, and the push button is surrounded in snow, which makes it impossible. So the ramp is cleared, but the push button is not. So I don't know if that requires a change in bylaw to make sure that snow operators are aware that the button is as important as the ramp, but that would be good. And Chair Harris, I would love to ask my last question of Mr. Petitpier, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Petitpier, as has been noted by a couple of my esteemed colleagues, not everyone who needs accessible housing has the same mobility issues that I do. Some have neurodivergence or other differences that might result in different accommodations. For example, if I'm in a housing unit, I don't want it to be soundproof because if I am in trouble, I need people to know that. But someone with neurological sensitivities might, for example, require greater soundproofing than I would. So I wonder if you could speak to the diversity of accommodations that we can offer in different accessible housing types, or the modifications that can be done based on an individual tenant or a family's needs.
Yeah, great question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So I'll go back to part of what I spoke of in my presentation and elaborate a bit more. So the two factors there. Really, we're trying to make the units that we're building under an accessibility framework as accessible for as many people and as many different disabilities as possible. That is impossible work. Everybody is going to be unique, and the needs are different. But if we build them to be as flexible as possible, that's our starting place. From there, we'll work on individual accommodations based on tenants' needs, and also knowing that the same needs a tenant comes in with, well, those change over time too, and then we'll need to accommodate again from there. So we're starting from a place of trying to be as flexible as possible with the unit types that we're creating, but then we'll work on an individual basis based on individual needs and accommodations that we can suit for our tenants.
Thank you. And just for council's benefit, I want to underscore Councillor McCabe's comments around accessibility through the lifespan possibly changing and needing to be able to be possible for more than the number of people that are currently disabled. That is also beneficial because the more places that are accessible, the more people with disabilities can interact with non-disabled people in our community. There are so many friends who I would love to visit, but I can't because I can't get into their accommodations. And I mean, our public spaces in the region are great, but homes are more cozy. So the more accessible homes that we have, the better. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and awesome.
All right, thank you all for your presentations. That report is received, for information, so we appreciate that and all the work that's going on. I'll move on to our next agenda item, 712, Key Cultural Institutions 2025 funding allocations. I'll call on Rod Regier, Commissioner of Planning, Development and Legislative Services, to speak to the report. Rod.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Harris. In the 2025 budget, Council allocated funding for our large cultural institutions. These institutions are critical to the creative industries that facilitate the vibrancy of our life here in the region of Waterloo. And Council also directed the staff to move forward with a decision process to allocate funding. Julian Kingston is here to talk about the allocation, and the report describes how we are moving forward with that allocation in 2025. Julian.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the KCI, just a few reminders. It's a collaborative effort that we work together with the cultural leads from Waterloo and Kitchener. I'll just go into the breakdown in the report to talk about how the funds, so it was $840,603 that were approved in budget, and we've allocated those against the institutions using the same allocations from last year. So Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery has $100,000. The Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery has $93,587. Drayton Entertainment has $261,291, and the museum has $385,725 in the allocations. We also, as a reminder, have other cultural streams coming up. The KCIs, to be eligible for the KCI, these are really the largest, most kind of impactful institutions, cultural institutions in the region. They'll have an operating budget in excess of, operating expenses in excess of $1 million. They'll have staff and structures. They also have facilities that they're responsible for. As we go through looking at some of the other streams that would be coming up, major arts and cultural organizations, that grant stream opens in the beginning of May, and the Cultural Drivers of Tourism grant stream opens at the end of May. So we have, between those three cultural streams, we have a kind of a diversity of organizations that we're able to support.
So with that, we're open to questions.
And we have at least one. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kingston, for this report. I'm really concerned that our valuable and limited property tax dollars be used in ways to keep key cultural institutions throughout our region viable. So I'm wondering if there has been any work done based on the upper limit of criteria, perhaps based on an organization's net worth or net earnings for a particular year.
That's a good question. So through the chair, when we look at the financials for the organization, we don't stratify them by their financials. So there is quite a difference between the KCIs in terms of what the higher level of their budgets are and the kind of the lower level. In principle, the grants, I think when they were initially established, we're looking at sort of around the 10% of the operating revenue level. We actually don't meet that marker. We're quite a ways from it. And so some of the institutions, the ones that are on the lower end of the budgets, are closer to that 10%. The larger institutions are quite a ways away from it.
Right, but if an organization doesn't need our funding in order to stay afloat, I think that's worthwhile to know. And so I'm just wondering, Chair Harris, if I can offer direction to staff in this regard to look into a limit, like an upper limit criteria in terms of whether an organization needs funding or whether I would need to table a motion to get such a report.
I don't know what's the answer to that question. Yeah, I mean, staff, is that, Rado, if you want to respond to that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Harris. Absolutely, we can definitely take direction from council on or from the committee on this. We do have an ongoing conversation with our area municipal colleagues on the criteria for evaluation of the key cultural institutions. That evaluation most recently took place, I guess, in mid 2024 in the preparation for the budget cycle for the 2025 budget. And it's certainly a discussion that we can have with them and bring back to council for consideration.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That would be great. If that could be added to the committee tracking list, that would be awesome.
Matt, you also wanted to chime in on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just also a reminder that as part of the decisions made by Council in October, the review of grant stream criteria, whether their applications or funding, is our objective, and Council's objective was to focus it in the second year of a mandate to be able to provide stability for the institutions throughout the rest of the mandate. So we can definitely take this back. I would say we also want to be a little bit wary of Council's direction to kind of package all of the changes that you might want in from the grant streams to be able to deal with those in the second year of the next mandate.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the report. My question is regarding the difference between the allotments of money between Drayton Entertainment and the museum. It would seem to me that they're both on an equal par in terms of their outreach in the community and the aspects of the fact that they certainly have a great impact. But I don't understand why there is a difference in the grants between the two. So the
through the chair, the grant allocations have been kept constant. And the 261,000 was the amount they were allocated in the previous year. So we've maintained those allocations for this year. If we looked at that sort of 10% rule of thumb, for Drayton Entertainment would actually take up the entire grant, more than the entire grant allocation. So there's just some, sort of a look at equity in terms of spreading the monies across the KCIs.
So what you're saying is that the way it sits right now, you're satisfied with the differentiation?
I think from a staff point of view, we looked at it and said we wanted to maintain the status quo.
But I might expect the status quo into the following year then, or are you going to be re-looking at this?
Well, we'll be doing, sorry, through the chair, we'll be doing that grant review that Mathieu referred to. So it's not impossible for the grant allocations to change.
So I would expect, Mr. Chair, that as we go ahead with this, that's fine. As we go ahead with this, that I would like a better explanation in the future of the differentiation between the two groups. Okay, I think they're equal. I don't think that there should be a difference whatsoever in terms of their impacts on the community. Drayton's got 2 theaters. It's got a children's academy. It has a huge outreach in this region. So I'll just leave that with you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Erb.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Maybe just picking up on Councillor Craig's question, and perhaps staff can help clarify this, Mr. Begier. I think last year was the first year that Drayton applied and we funded them, if I'm not mistaken. And the guideline was based on a certain percentage of their operating costs, and we couldn't go above that. And that's why there was this difference in some of the organizations. But help me, I'm not remembering it as clearly as I should. And can you add a little more clarity to that, Mr. Regier?
Yeah, I'm struggling to. I recall the conversation in 2023 where we established their eligibility for 2024. Julian, do you recall the formula that we used in 2023 and for their 2024 application?
So that predates me, so I wasn't part here for that those calculations, but I can refer back to the sort of the 10% guideline. But as I said, their operating budget is such that if we went to 10%, we wouldn't actually have any. There's not enough funding in the budget allocation to cover that. So it was capped at a lower level.
Through you, Chair Harris, what I can offer is to send an email to council following with some of that background.
I think that would help clarify partly what Councillor Craig is asking, and sorry, I can't remember it myself. What I did want to say, thanks for the report, and I know the region and council has engaged KPMG to review our arts granting and to various organizations, and my understanding is that staff currently have that report and are reviewing it. And I'm not sure when we would be expecting something coming back to council. Do you have a timeline when that might be coming back?
For the review of the Arts Fund, we do have the report from KPMG. We are reviewing it with senior staff at the moment. I would expect it to come forward to council in maybe a couple of months once we've had a chance to review the recommendations.
Okay. For me personally, that'll be something interesting and something that hopefully we can move forward on. My council colleagues and some staff will know that I have some interest and concerns about how we do granting to all of these organizations over the years and sort of the inconsistency and the politics and the dynamics of it. And so I'm looking forward to getting this report back and seeing if we can provide some more equitable funding to the organizations in the community. And ideally, for me, it would be nice if we could take it out of the political realm and put it into some kind of a community-based funding, but that's for further discussions. Anyway, looking forward to having that report coming back.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the report. I think in terms of Drayton, just for clarification, the first time they got the grant was when the Kitchener Symphony was pretty well the only one getting that grant. And so when we opened it up, and then since then we had the art galleries, etc. I think it's important that we look at the impact that an organization has on the region. And I think that that's where should be one of our more important criteria. The other thing in terms of the looking at the grants that are coming up, I would encourage staff to look at some regional equity, because when we look at these grants over and over, we see so many going to basically Kitchener, Waterloo, and very few going to Cambridge. And I really would like some criteria there to try to spread some of the this grant money across the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. Councillor Erb pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. But I think that we do need to look at all the other categories as a whole, because if you just talk about, the key cultural institutions, there are certain qualifications for that, then there's a level below, then there's kind of a whole bunch of other little things that are kind of pushed into one. So I find it doesn't always make sense, and I think also Councillor Wolf is completely correct. There isn't any cultural institutions in Cambridge that would qualify for the KCI, but they're really close. So I feel like looking at how we're doing the granting and also percentages, but a lot of it is just that they've been doing it forever. There's certain organizations that have been getting the same amount of money, so they just kind of grandfathered it in and then they keep pushing it forward. But it's not necessarily equitable, based on other organizations that now qualify. So I think also we leave out a lot of new smaller festivals and things like that just because they don't have standards of being registered as a nonprofit, but a lot of them are so new and so small they don't have the money to register as a nonprofit. So I think we should be looking at those smaller categories as well, and looking at how we can integrate it into maybe one of the lower categories. So that's just kind of my little notes that I've been writing, but I'm glad that we are going to do a review, but I was just wondering if the review is just going to be on the KC and the Arts Fund, or if it's going to include all of the grants.
Okay, I'm continuing to add to the list of questions. Just want to obviously contain our focus to the report itself. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to support the comments that have been made by Councillor Hunick when we look at the eligibility criteria for these organizations. We don't look at what their finances are. So I think we should be looking for these types of organizations. The executive salaries, if the executive salaries are huge on one, I think their board needs to be making a decision on whether they keep the executive salaries low to be able to pay their bills and do the programs they want, versus taxpayers making up monies for the executive salary. So I think Councillor Hunick is dead on with the bit about the financial statements of these organizations. In order to get taxpayers' dollars, they should be qualifying in a way that they show that they have consideration also for the taxpayers footing this bill.
Okay, Councillor Foxton?
Thank you. And this is not to, okay, this is a bit of a big session. So several times I've heard council staff, everyone, the region is 3 cities, 4 townships. And so many times this morning I've heard cities, cities, cities. Let's remember we're 7 municipalities under the region. Thank you.
Thanks for that reminder, Councillor Foxton. Councillor Salomon?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Foxton. I'm glad that we're legitimately sitting around here as other municipalities that aren't cities. But my question is actually more so procedurally about the report, based off the comments that have been made. My understanding is this is just for information because we have already removed this from the political realm. We made our budget decision about the funding envelope that was being given. So really, this is just a report saying, look at the funds that we've allocated. And
Correct.
Okay.
It's for information. There'll be no vote after this report.
So based off that, I would just maybe say some people are making really great points, and it's great that there is a review coming back, but I think we need to remember about our processes and the fact that this has been done. It has been taken out of the political realm. We really don't need to make it political right now. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Redmond.
I'm on exactly the same wavelength as Councillor Salonen. And just to remind Council that when this does come back for review, debating the criteria will be very important rather than trying to retrofit it. And this is just for information. And I know we're talking about financial situation, and this is in no way meant to point a finger at staff, but I was really caught off guard when KW Symphony was no longer viable. So not only do you, if we are looking at the criteria, look at the upper limit, and I understand that audited financials are always a year out of date, so it's not sort of just in time, but maybe one of the things we need to turn our minds to when we look at the criteria is also what are the right questions to ask. But this is just for information, and I thank staff for bringing it forward.
Okay, colleagues, that was received for information. We are going to take a quick 5-minute break before we head to our next agenda item. So, colleagues, I know we've run pretty straight through this morning, so we'll take 5 minutes, back at just before 10:02, and we'll resume with our next Okay, colleagues, we're going to resume our agenda here with item 713. I'm going to call on Wayne Steffler, our Commissioner of Corporate Services and CFO, to speak to the report. Wayne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Harris. So just to give a bit of an overview of the report, the 2025 budget underwent extensive review and multiple processes aimed at identifying efficiencies and minimizing costs. The final 2025 plan and budget was approved by Council in December with the motion directing staff to reduce costs in specific budget lines and bring them back to Council for approval. In response to the Council motion, staff went through a challenging process to identify adjustments to those budget lines with the least impact on service delivery. Some of these adjustments involved modifying maintenance levels, while others reflect a greater tolerance for risk in some of the projected costs related to usage and price fluctuations, and also taking into account our previous year's budget to actual results. This means that this does mean we are at a greater risk of being over budget this year in a number of areas, especially when we think of the recent potential for cost fluctuations. It also means implementing some new things at a slower pace as well. Table 1 in the report does a breakdown of the net increase. So there you can see per the motion, these budget lines had a 9.32% increase. After removing in-year 2024 budget adjustments and expansions, this reduces it to 6.71. And then following these adjustments and the previous reduction we made during the budget process, this would stand at an increase of 2.29%. And also, as part of the Q2 2025 reporting process, staff will be conducting a thorough analysis of actuals. We'll assess trends in revenues and expenditures and service demands. This in-depth review will help us identify financial pressures, inform future forecasting, and refine our budget assumptions for 2026. So by leveraging this data-driven approach, we will ensure the 2026 budget process is based on a clear understanding of our financial position and evolving service needs. This level of review is important, especially due to the level of price and supply uncertainty that may occur to us over the next 6 to 12 months. Back over to you.
Okay, colleagues, I know hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at the report, especially the list that was proposed by staff, asked by us, of course. I had a chance to speak to many of you on this, however, not all. And I'd like to suggest that we perhaps, I know we've got questions, which I'll go to, of course, next, but that perhaps we address the levy impacted items first, because I believe that's ultimately, I think, where we need to somewhat land on. And we can opt to deal with or not even deal with the gross side of things that are non-levy impacted. That's kind of the direction as to which I would like to proceed in, but I'll open it up for questions first and go from there. So, Councillor Foxton.
So I'm going to do the exact opposite of what you wanted. You want me to shut up? The number of people that want me to shut up, I understand. But so it was just the wastewater one, the wastewater one. The operating budget cuts do not appear to be applied to a rate reduction and instead directed to the tax base, which is incorrect. It's paid through our separate billing. And this is a contravention of the Safe Water Drinking Act, and it also the MMAH principles for financial management of water systems. So, I mean, we have to protect our water. And the other thing is, there's concerning cuts, including SCADA software, equipment, chemicals, biosolids. This poses risk to the drinking water supply and the wastewater treatment for our residents. I have a real concern about this. I don't think this should have been touched.
Well, and actually, just to clarify again, Councillor Foxton, that would be on the gross side. So non-levy impacted. So if you look at the motion from December 20th, it called upon, staff to come back with, a list of items that would reduce the overall budget by that $6,900,000 number. However, the levy impact was the $2,642,694 that we really need to address. That's a must. That's kind of we have to deal with that piece. We don't have to do anything on the other side because it's non-levy impacted, which would include the items you speak of. So, if we don't touch those, then they're not going to be impacted, is what I'm trying to say.
Totally agree, and that it will stay the way it is, and
Yeah.
but my concern is that I don't think we should be making those cuts at all to wastewater and water.
And that's very well your prerogative, frankly. And so that was my suggestion: is let's deal with the levy impacted
Understood.
items.
I will shut up
and
now.
we can
Thank
choose
you.
to we thank staff for their work on that side. However, we're not going to adopt any of those recommendations at this point. And so with that, I'll carry on to Councillor Salonen next.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm happy to move an amendment, I guess, for the motion if it's on the floor.
Well, we need to get somebody to move it and second it first. Let's get it out
Okay,
there.
sure,
So
I'll move.
you'll move the list of items. Right. So
Okay,
let's get
that's fine.
somebody to move and seconded the list of levy impacted items first on the floor. I'll go Doug and Sue. So we're going to address to clerk staff the levy impacted items first only, and now Natasha with potential amendment.
Perfect. That's fine. I don't need to do an amendment. I thought that we had the motion on the floor. So the motion is representing what I was trying to achieve, that we're just looking at the levy impacted part.
Okay.
I did have a question, however. I guess my interpretation when we gave the direction in December, specifically when we were talking about the travel expenses, I was really expecting to see things come back for travel conference expenses for directors, CAOs, and even council for that matter. I'm curious why that wasn't included as options and what we could explore in terms of options of that. Looking at, I know that we all get great experience from going to conferences and build great networks, but also, do we really need the number of staff that we sometimes take, or even for that matter, the number of councillors at every one? I know some municipalities have rotations as to who goes to which events in terms of large conferences. I know these are small dollars, but they do all add up. And I was just kind of expecting to see that in this report. So if anyone could speak to that a little bit more.
Through the chair. So looking at the motion, it was to address the increases in those various accounts. And those specific types of travel, that's not where there was a material amount of increase. So we looked at where are these things increasing, how can we reduce that overall increase?
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. And this is just for clarification on the budgeting and how it's done. So water and wastewater, is that not a separate budget from our regular operating?
Through the chair, that's correct. But again, the motion referred to the entire budget, which summed up all those lines, including levy, including water. So that's why we had to address it in this way to fulfill the motion. We had to identify those parts as well, because that was part of when you look at the overall travel amount, the supplies, that includes the water budget as well. That's how it was laid out to us.
Okay, I don't think that was the intent, but okay, thank you.
Chair Redmond.
So thank you, Chair Harris. And I don't know if Councillor Erb is on the list. I would have to thank staff. I think they were very literal in their interpretation of what this motion was. I think the vast majority of council members felt there was a spirit of a motion as opposed to literally, which speaks to some of the concerns that Councillor Shantz has brought forward. And because of that, I'm really happy that we're dealing with the levy list. There is one item on there that I have some concerns with, but I know that Councillor Erb did as well, and that was the reduction of the security for encampments. So I will allow him to sort of take action on that, just to say that I felt that this was a topic that had come to council, we had dealt with, and we had said we do not want to reduce in this area. So, but be really happy to support a consideration of taking that out. And again, I know Councillor Erb was wanting to do that, but happy that we're dealing with the levy impact. And I guess depending on how this proceeds, we may have to ask staff to go and find some of those savings, because I think the amount of I think it's $2.3 million is already baked into the budget.
Yep. Councillor Erb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Chair Redmond is correct. I was hoping to move an amendment to the motion that we would remove the funding, the reduction that's proposed in here for encampment security. And I think it's important for us to remember that this security at all of these locations is just not for the areas around the outside of it to protect the public, but also the residents that are inside, particularly places like University, Frederick Street, those. So I would like to move an amendment to the policy that we remove that amount out of it. And I'm glad we're dealing only with the levy affected issues on this report. Trying to make a decision on this report is almost as hard as reading it. Thanks for the report, but no thanks for the font size.
Okay, so we do have an amendment moved by Councillor Erb to pull out that 349,766. That would be the item pertaining to the security at our encampment security. Do we have a seconder for that amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Liggett. And I guess with that, we would be, actioning staff to take the next 2 weeks ahead of council to come back with, and work with the chair's office to work with a replacement for that, or make up that 349,776 with perhaps other items. So any other discussion on the amendment at all? All right, so we'll move to vote on the amendment, folks, if you don't mind. We'll head over to eScribe. Yeah, we can, that the motion be amended to strike out the funding reduction proposed for encampment security, that staff will need to come back with a replacement for that 349 number, and work with perhaps the chair's office to nail down those list of items that would make up that difference ahead of next council meeting. Okay, that's carried, folks. So I will go back to our speakers list. I did see Councillor Liggett, I know was on there. Yes, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. When I look at the salt and bus part replacements, I'm kind of curious as to they're lumped together when they're two such vastly different ones and we don't know which one is which. But I have concerns with regarding the salt. If we're talking about inventory, what we've just gone through and we're going to go through again this week, and I know in the city we aren't able to get to our road, some of our roads, and the ice buildup, and I find that that's a safety risk. We haven't looked at the long-term costs for this. And it's not a long-term sustainable savings because there's going to be future increases in the cost. So for us to be short-sighted and in trying to bring that inventory down, I don't think we should be doing that. I think it's something that we should be looking at to make sure that the costs for the future and the needs for the future, we have no idea what storms are coming at us. So I don't think that this should be part of the budget reduction.
Okay, I would like to go to Acting Commissioner Spooner to make any comments to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for the question. So let's do the easy part first. So on bus parts, Council, you'll recall that we had approved a smaller GRT service package for 2025 than what we originally put forward. We'd reduced that. And so that gives us the ability to retire some of our buses that were from 08 and 09 purchase years. And those are the buses that consume a lot of additional bus parts near end of life. We do a lot of maintenance activities. And so I'm actually quite comfortable with the bus parts piece. In terms of how we arrived at the suggestion of salt for roads, so we did a look back at the previous 5 years, the spend on salt in those years, and aligned to that. Obviously, when we did that activity, we hadn't seen the January and February that we are experiencing now. So that will be a risk. We will maintain the roads. We will not take. We will not have reduced salt. We'll make sure we have enough salt to do the job. It just becomes a budget risk for end of year. Thank you.
Councillor Liggett, we might come back to that unless you had a follow-up. Do you want to have a follow-up?
Nope, that's good.
Does that help answer? Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess just on the salt thing quickly, we also are working to try and reduce salt overall with the Smart About Salt campaign. So I assume that applies to us, like the region and the region's work, as well as individual homeowners. But my concern, and I don't actually like to talk about this particularly publicly because it's about cybersecurity, is just what's listed there for IT licenses and operation charges, because we know the risks of being like municipalities and governments, and I mean, people are under attack. Our IT systems are under attack constantly. So I'm just wondering, perhaps if Mr. Yancey could give us a. I mean, again, I don't really like to talk about our cybersecurity capability publicly, but if you could kind of give us a sense of the position we're in, should this 166,000 be removed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and through the chair. Yeah, the license reductions that are in there are broad across all IT licenses, not simply cybersecurity. We carry a contingency of licenses for changes in staffing so that we have them in stock. We've gone through and we've brought those to a lower level. Therefore, there may be a slight delay when we go to procure, but I don't think any of the changes we've made in that 166,000 will affect cybersecurity. Other supplies, you notice UPSs. So for example, we carry a stock. When we have power interruptions in locations, the UPS protects our equipment to prevent outages. Not having one to immediately replace might result in a brief outage until we can get one from another location. So we will, again, deliver a secure service as best we can with the resources we have. None of these will directly impact cybersecurity. No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that response.
No, good question. Councillor Salen?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just as we have separated out the levy versus non-levy impacts, there are a few areas like the DC charge exemption, the utilities, facilities maintenance, as well as the paramedic service expansion that have a non-levy impact, but also a levy impact. I want to clearly understand, if we were to accept these, is it simply the levy impact that we're going to see the change on then? / does that relationship actually work between those funding dollars or some of those impacted by joint payments from other levels of government? I want to understand that relationship.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. If you can just take the levy component of that and it won't impact the other part.
Okay, great. And then just one other point of clarification on the cancel of contracts, the canceling our 211 with the regional information no longer being on it. That's a little bit of a concern for me, as that's a resource that is known provincially wide for people to get information and be sent to the proper jurisdiction for items. I was wondering if anyone could speak to exactly what that risk and impact is for us. I don't know how many people get referred through 211 to us, as well as what would be the cost of keeping that particular subscription going.
Sorry, yeah, just going back to through you, Chair, going back to your previous questions, these different lines are actually quite different. The one where we can't separate the levy impact from the non-levy impact is the paramedic services expansion, for example. So that one, that delay is a delay in our expenditure, but also the provincial support to that in 2025. But it's again, this is a delay, so it's a deferral, so we're not losing any money long term. We're just losing it in 2025.
Okay, colleagues, we do have
Sorry, Chair. Could I have an answer on the 211?
Oh, I'm sorry, the 211. I thought he addressed that one. Okay, sorry, 211.
Thanks, through the chair. So right now, the region pays about $30,000 a year to have a couple of our offices listed on 211. In reviewing the contract, it's not being very well utilized. And so not a lot of residents are accessing it, and there is a limited amount of information compared to what's easily Googleable or calling the region's line. So there's, I think, little risk, but again, there is risk for those who might be using 211.
Thank you very much.
Okay, got ahead of myself, but colleagues, I don't have any other questions. We've got a motion on the floor that has been amended, so we'll go to the vote on this particular one. So again, we're voting on the levy impacted items as presented by staff only, with the amendment by Councillor Erb to remove the security encampment piece, and ask staff to come back ahead of our next council meeting, working with the chair's office to come up with items that would offset the removal of that item. We'll go to a vote. That approves to be carried. We have one more item on our agenda, and I'm just going to try to make sure I get to it. So we have, yeah, just a second. So yes, 8.1, the council committee tracking list that's received for information. Other business, 9.1, Regional Chair Redmond provided a motion which is listed on today's agenda. We will need a seconder of that motion, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Thank you, Councillor Nowak. I'll call on Regional Chair Redmond to speak to her motion.
Thank you, colleagues. I am not going to read the motion. You received it in advance, but I'm pleased to introduce it, and I thank Councillor Nowak for seconding it. This motion acknowledges both the strength of our regional economy and the significant challenges we are soon to face. Waterloo Region has long been a hub of innovation, manufacturing, and economic resilience. Our businesses, workers, and institutions have built a globally competitive economy that contributes not only to our region's prosperity, but to the broader success of Ontario and Canada. However, as we look ahead at 2025, we must be proactive in addressing a major potential economic hurdle. The United States government has signaled the possibility of imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian-made goods. Given that nearly 77% of Ontario's domestic exports go to the U.S. and that 97% of our regional exports come from the manufacturing sector, such a tariff would have profound consequences for the region of Waterloo. Manufacturing is a key pillar of our economy, accounting for approximately 20% of our gross domestic product and up to 17% of our workforce. The numbers tell a clear story. Nearly $19.4 billion in exports flowed from Waterloo Region businesses in 2023, with $18.9 billion of that directly from manufacturing. If these tariffs are enacted, we risk seeking supply chains being disrupted, jobs threatened, and businesses struggling to compete in their largest export market. This is why it is critical that we act now. The motion lays out 3 key steps to help mitigate the risk of the region of Waterloo while maintaining critical services and overall strengthening our economic resilience. The first is the regional staff will explore options to limit the impact of these tariffs on regional services, ensuring that our local government can continue operating effectively without excessive financial strain. Second, a review of our procurement processes to assess how we can increase the Made in Canada provisions, supporting our local manufacturers and reducing our dependence on foreign imports. Third, a call to action to the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation and the Business Economic Support Team, also known as BEST WR, to develop a regional action plan bringing together business leaders, industry experts, and policymakers to safeguard our economic future. We must not take a wait-and-see approach. The time to act is now. The potential tariffs present not only a challenge, but also an opportunity to strengthen local supply chains, deepen intra-Canadian trade partnerships, and advocate for our regional interests at the provincial and federal levels. Waterloo Region has always been at the forefront of innovation and adaptability. From the advanced manufacturing to tech-driven industries, we have consistently found ways to evolve, and to thrive. With the right strategy, collaboration, and investment in our businesses, we can navigate this uncertainty and continue to build a resilient, prosperous region. I thank you for your support, and I know this is something that all area municipalities have also turned their thoughts to.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Sorry, my question was back to the budget piece. The pieces that weren't levy, just a question back to the budget piece. The pieces that were not levy impact, such as the water and wastewater, what happens to those? Sorry, I'm still not clear what.
Sorry, yeah, repeat your question again. So we're just going to jump back to the original one that we just dealt with, So
the water and wastewater pieces of that.
No impact. There'd be no impact to any of those items.
So those won't be done.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify
staff
that.
presented two options, levy, non-levy, and we've only dealt with the levy items, and none of the wastewater items were included on the levy reduction, so there'd be no change to those other items.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted clarity. Thanks.
Sure. Councillor Salonen on the motion, on tariff motion.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Redmond, for bringing this forward. I definitely support it. I am curious, though, if you would be open to, I know that your motion really focuses on manufacturing, which of course is a huge part of our local economy, but I also wanted to acknowledge agriculture, and agriculture would be heavily impacted by these tariffs. If maybe you would be open to just wording in the very last paragraph for support Waterloo Region businesses, including agricultural industry.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Chair Redmond, for bringing this forward, and something that I hope we'll all definitely support. This whole issue has clearly brought the concept of patriotism in a higher level to our country, which is good. It seems that these tariffs are going to be here for a longer period of time than we thought, so I don't think it's going to be, excuse me, a 2 or 3 week news cycle and we're going to forget about it. And it's probably a wake-up call for locally and nationally and globally that maybe the economic order has to change in some degree. I want to focus it sort of on our local level. And so how often when these kinds of things happen, the trickle-down effect is that it often affects the most vulnerable in our community. They may not be able to pay for the fruit and the vegetables that they need for healthy eating because of the imports and a variety of other things like that. So I want us to remember that how the impact it'll have on some of the people that are most vulnerable in our community, and that we pay attention to that, because often those are the people that don't have the voice. We're advocating for the large business community on a broader scale, and so that we continue to be the voice for those people in our community who might be suffering the most from this, but that we don't hear for. And just another thing that's not related to the tariffs, but it is related to the tariffs, where certain audiences have decided to boo the U.S. national anthem. I can't see that many settings in our community where that happens. I remember, I think Flint, Michigan was here for a Rangers game in January. I'm not sure if they're coming back again, and where the potential of the national anthem for the United States being played again. I hope we're better than that in Waterloo region, and that's something that we wouldn't do. But again, it speaks to the patriotism, I think, and the emotional issue that this has ignited in our community. And so if that's going to happen again in a setting where the national anthem is going to be played, I hope in Waterloo region that we can set a higher standard for that and demonstrate who we are as people for the rest of our country. Thank you.
Agreed, Councillor. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. Just to mention that Cambridge's motion on this will be coming later today to do with the tariffs. I'm also a representative on the Big City Mayor's committee to deal with this. And Mayor Verbanovich is on the FCM one, and he's actually at meetings today on that, and has been in Ottawa this week as well. When I think about this, I think about having been a business person until last year in this community, the effect that it has on some of the smaller operations, and we have a lot of companies who are much smaller, and they rely on the market of the American market. And so it's going to be hitting us bigger than what most people think. If we look at the large manufacturing, just in Cambridge alone, if I talk about Babcock and Wilcox, if I talk about Toyota, and if I talk about, just trying to think, Frito-Lay, for instance, that's over 9,000 employees, direct employees. And then if we add Woodstock onto Toyota, we're looking at 11,570. These people live in the region, and I'm just addressing what's in Cambridge, not even the whole region here. We're going to be severely affected by this. And I think about the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. That's been happening to us over quite a number of years to do with Canadian manufacturing. We weren't paying attention to some of this stuff. We should have long ago recognize that the United States could duplicate what they did a few years ago with the tariffs, and we would be in trouble. And we haven't done that. But that frog in the boiling water, the American public is now in that pot of boiling, simmering water with us. They're going to lose big time as well, and we're going to all suffer together, hand in hand on this. So I am so supportive of this motion, and I'm thankful that Chair Redmond has brought it forward, and I expect to have full unanimous support at Regional Council, City Council tonight as well.
Okay, Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Redmond, also for bringing this forward. I just wanted to point out with the procurement portion of this and how it can affect the lower tiers. And I'm thinking of Wellesley right now. Tonight we're going to be dealing with a request by staff to purchase what they call a tandem rollover truck. And it's interesting to note that chassis is going to be built in the United States. And that chassis has components on it from China, from Mexico, from a number of different countries. That chassis has got to come back up into Canada to get refitted with all the components that we want for the rollover portion of that truck. And that's going to be done actually in Mount Forest. But I'm not sure how many times that's going to go back and forth through the States. The current price tag on this machine is roughly $650,000. And there's a 18 month to 24 month lead-in period before we can get it. So I'm just concerned of what could happen over that period of time and how much this thing could end up finally costing us. There will be some transparency on the purchaser, on the company for sure, but I think we're going to be stuck with the cost no matter what. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, we'll just keep that focus to the motion that we've got before us. Chair Redmond, or actually, sorry, Councillor Foxon.
Thank you, and just very quickly, because this has drawn us together as a nation, And I just got this notice, and it said Scotland, Belgium, Australia, Italy, Mexico, Denmark, and Norway are just a few countries that have citizens refusing to buy U.S. products and buy Canadian only. So that's great news. And this is a great motion. I think all the municipalities are working on their motions. So I'm really proud of Canada right now.
Okay. Thank you. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton, and I'm sorry I was distracting the chair. I know that our eminently trained staff are wise and say that there are no friendly amendments, so that's really what I was looking to clarify. So if Councillor Sallin wants to amend the motion and get a seconder, I think Councillor Nowak and I would be very open.
I think we're going to do an unanimous consent that we adopt.
Okay. Can we do unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent. Okay, that's approved. Yeah. So we'll just shake it like that. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. My colleagues have said so much that I can't really repeat or don't need to repeat that. But just to reiterate a little bit of what Councillor Nowak said about the complexity of it and the whole back and forth is really a concern. I'm glad to hear other countries are going to support us. And just a quick editorial, I grew up in a house where my dad was a factory worker, and back in the day, which now I'm dating myself, but the big thing was buy North American, and it's unfortunate that at this point in history that seems to be falling apart. So thank you for the motion.
Okay, colleagues, with that, we're going to go to a vote on the motion as unanimously consented amended, and we'll go from there. Oh, got his thumbs up. Okay, that is carried, everybody, unanimously. All right, the next meeting is scheduled for March the 4th. We will now start a vote to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Councillor Sallin and seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That looks like it'll be passed in favor, and we'll look for 5 minutes, colleagues, for the commencement.